Welcome to Franchise Killer, a podcast where we pick movie franchises or wannabe franchises, review them film by film, and see where things went wrong. Or right. I don't know who to do for that one.
I feel like Jack Black should be the one.
I can't do it. All right. Can you do it?
I don't even know how to do it.
You can take it.
I don't.
Do his like metal yell, but way back from the mic.
Let's see. Hold on.
But in or right.
That sounded more like Black Sabbath or something.
I don't even know what it sounded like.
Well, you know, there's a whole thing.
No,
with
you
Jack
did
Black.
you did Led Zeppelin.
I know, but he does that in School of
That's
Rock.
true.
I don't know. I can't do Jack Black.
All right, I'm Reese. Across from me,
David.
to his left,
Irina.
and to my right. Wow.
Yeah, we're good.
Is that the brontosaurus falling off the cliff?
Noah.
Or
Yeah,
Anne
sorry.
Dunaway.
It's Faye Dunaway,
Darrow.
Naomi Watts. Which one is it?
It's Darrow.
It's Darrow. Okay. And ladies and gentlemen, I give you AJ, the eighth wonder of the world.
Oh.
How you doing?
How you doing?
Today we are talking about King Kong, movie that came out in 2005. No, this is not the 1933 original. The movie is directed by Peter Jackson, who also directed, and I'm going to go through the whole thing, pretty much. If I missed anything, just let me know. I think there's like a couple of stragglers that I might not have put up on his filmography, but we'll see. Bad Taste, Meet the Feebles, Brain Dead, Heavenly Creatures, Forgotten Silver, The Frighteners, The Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Oh yeah, that small franchise.
Yep. The Lovely Bones, The Hobbit trilogy, another small franchise. Actually, same franchise, but you know what I mean. They Shall Not Grow Old, and the upcoming Beatles documentary, Get Back. He's kind of been into like a documentary phase lately, which, from what I've heard, I have not seen They Shall Not Grow Old, but I've heard it is amazing. Yeah, I've heard it's great. It's like a whole bunch of footage from World War I that is like colored. Like it's the first time it's seen in color, and there's a whole new.
They also had to track because there's like a gap in the normal film, and then I believe AJ, you may know better, but they track it together where it runs real time.
Yeah, he seems like a guy that has more fun in the editing room than he does like on the film set almost.
I think he has
like,
fun everywhere.
I think
on
he
the
does,
set.
but he's a big like tinkerer, like behind closed doors. I think he loves that whole editing process. Yeah. Once the movie's in the can and he can just like tinker with everything.
I think he's a true artist.
I
That's
think-
what I think.
Oh yeah,
Just the dance
I think he
moves
likes
alone.
just about every aspect because you always find his little cameos throughout every movie he's in.
I was not trying to
pretty
say
much.
he doesn't enjoy like shooting his
Oh,
movies.
no, I know.
Wait, was he in this?
Yes, he's a gunner.
Oh, I didn't
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah, so is Rick Baker, the guy who played King Kong in the 1970 version. So in the 1970 version, he plays Kong and he kills King Kong in this one.
Dang.
He's that very well-known makeup effects guy who did like a whole bunch of stuff. We talked about him for our Planet of the Apes episode, the first
right.
one. I think he was responsible for a lot of that as well. But yeah, that's Peter Jackson. That's one of our favorite directors.
Our boy.
We always reference Lord of the Rings. It's, I think, and I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think it's a lot of our favorite film franchises.
Yeah.
Of all
We're never
time.
going to cover it.
We will. The thing is, when this show ever ends, if it does ever end, like that's our like
That's it.
that's going to be the crowning achievement at the end
It's
of it.
our white
hopefully.
whale.
Yeah, and I don't want to say that we won't talk about it earlier. Maybe we'll get the urge to like. We just got to get it out.
Hey,
We got to talk.
look, we're
about
in
it.
Austin, so you know who lives in Austin, right?
We do.
Elijah Wood.
Elijah
get
Wood.
Elijah
No,
Wood.
I'm going to go track him down.
That would be the most amazing
He
episode.
seems just nice enough
Sandra
to where if
Bullock.
you really like pinned him down, he'd
Matthew
accept.
McConaughey.
Pinned him down.
No. You remember him?
Kyle Chandler.
Oh,
Yep,
yeah,
Kyle Chandler as well.
But wait, I heard you say Sandra Bullock. What was that?
She was, or I guess used to live in Austin.
Oh, yeah, she did.
Oh, I thought you might have been referencing something.
Matthew McConaughey. Yeah, lots of famous people who live
Let's
there.
get him for the Lord of the Rings episode.
That'd be
Like,
so silly.
there's this movie coming out called The Last Duel by Ridley Scott, and it's one of his like period epics that he likes to do. Like he comes out with one of these like every 5 years or so. He just gets that bug to do like period pieces, like big war movies, like Gladiator, Kingdom of Heaven, Robin Hood, and Exodus. And The Last Duel is the latest one, but it has Ben Affleck and Matt Damon in it, and those two actors just do not blend with that era. And that's
not at all.
I feel the same way if you were to like insert Matthew McConaughey into something. Like I could not see him as like
Treebeard. He's Treebeard
in Knight's Armor. Now I'm not saying The Last Duel looks bad. It actually looks very good.
Yeah.
Adam Driver's in it too, and
I love Adam
he's
Driver.
someone who completely blends with that setting. Like he just fits because he's kind of an odd.
He
looking,
fits anything
like,
just about.
Yeah. But yeah, that tangent aside, let's get back to the movie. The movie stars Naomi Watts, Jack Black, Adrian Brody, Thomas Kretschmann, sorry if I mispronounced that, Colin Hanks, Jamie Bell, and, of course, Andy Serkis. In 2 roles.
As he does.
You don't see that very often.
No.
We got a screenplay by Fran Walsh, Philippa Boyens, and Peter Jackson. So, for those that are new to this show, on this podcast, we first go over our thoughts on the film before revisiting it for the episode. Then we dive into the story, break it down bit by bit, and talk about the more significant moments. Then towards the end of the show, we give our brief reviews and numbered scores, along with an analysis on the health of the franchise and whether or not this film hurt it. So, Noah, had you seen King Kong before this episode?
Yes, I have. I don't even remember the context under which I watched it. I just know I watched it, and I have an opinion.
You have an opinion.
Yeah.
Cool. Irina.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw this in theaters, and especially since it was not long after Lord of the Rings had finished, which is crazy. It's weird to think that it was only a couple years after.
Yeah.
But I think we watched it as a family. Did we?
Probably.
I'm pretty sure we did.
I might have seen it twice in the theater, but
Yeah.
the first time I saw it was not with the family.
yeah.
Wait, how?
Because it was my friend Nick's birthday,
Oh, that's right.
and we saw it then. So
Yeah. Well, I know it was a theater experience because we obviously were familiar with Peter Jackson and we just wanted to see more. So
yeah.
Was AJ with you?
No, I don't remember seeing this in the theater. I mean,
Yeah, I
I
think
did
it was-
a lot of groundwork for it, but yeah.
Yeah. And I guess we can go to you too. Had you seen this movie before?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's iconic. I don't know who hasn't seen it. And just the fact alone that Jackson co-wrote it, and, it's a short film, but it was still high budget. And
Oh God.
Short film. A short film?
That's
This
like
movie
the
is short
instant
film?
like reveal that he did not watch King
I
Kong.
mean, it's like in the
20-minute short
National
film.
Film Registry. So, I mean, I don't know who hasn't. This has like touched on like iconic stuff everywhere.
Is it the other King Kong?
King Kong. Well, I know there's a hairy guy, like and then the girl like kind of runs away and stuff, but
But
then they bust out some sick dance moves.
What is this?
I feel like I should know what this is, but I don't.
I don't even.
Jackson co-wrote it. Like Michael Jackson co-wrote the Thriller music video.
What?
we're covering
What
music
is-
videos now.
What a stretch.
All right, that's
Dude, the connection between these is so
looser and looser.
Can you imagine me announcing that at the end of the last episode? We're watching the Thriller music video.
I bet people would enjoy our reaction.
Anyway, but yes, I was there with Nick and Reese, so thanks for remembering.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I had seen it since I was in the theater there.
So that's what you meant about choreography. I get it now.
Yeah, the dance moves. You can't see Peter Jackson, doing some zombie moves.
Hey, Andy Serkis did the Thriller dance in 13 Going on 30.
There is kind of a dance scene in King Kong. It's on ice, though.
King Kong on ice.
They're in a jungle or woods or whatever, and people are afraid.
Yeah.
David, had you seen this movie before?
Yeah. This one I feel like I should have seen growing up. 2005, like this was right up my alley. I never ever watched it, and I think Irina, you made me watch it probably like 5 or 6 years ago or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think it's when you found out I hadn't seen it, you're like, wait a second. All right, set aside 3.5 hours. We got a movie to watch.
I think it is so valuable to have someone like you on this podcast, David, who is not like what was not in the loop with our nostalgia.
Yeah.
You know, where it's like you're a bit on the outside.
You help ground us a little bit.
Lilo and Stitch, 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's immediately cut by the fact that Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor exists.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
Hey,
I don't think anything can live up to that standard for you.
that time you wait, what was the score you gave?
7 is higher than 6.26.
Oh, hold on a sec. There's going to be a time where there's somebody who's, killing people on behalf of the movies that we give poor scores. And they're going to go and they're going to hear Tomb of the Dragon Emperor and go, 7. All right. Brendan Fraser lives. And y'all are going to thank me for that one day.
That is a stretch.
Sorry, what?
So you think we're going to have a serial killer that bases his kills off of the scores we give movies?
Yes.
What would his serial killer name be?
The Cine Killer. The
Or
Cine
it's right there,
Literally,
or the franchise
killer. Yes.
the literal, that's what we're based
The
on.
literal franchise killer.
Wow, it was like laying
Those two
right
on
there
the
for me to use.
Yes. Didn't take it. Oh, man.
All right. With that said, David, you want to give us our quick call to action before we get to the story?
Yeah, I actually brought somebody in to help me with this. I think he really enjoys our stuff, so I'll let him do it. Hey, everybody. I'm Peter Jackson, and I'm here to promote Franchise Killer. And
You sound like the guy from Office Space. My Stapler.
But like with
No,
an accent.
Mixed with Crocodile Dundee.
No, let's hear it. Let's hear it.
I'm Peter Jackson, and I'm here to provide context for you guys to watch this. It's a great franchise killer episode, and you should listen to them. And I did Lord of the Rings, which means you should trust me. And yeah, they're on Apple, they're on Twitter, they're on Instagram, and yeah, you can follow them there and give them that 5-star review on Apple.
So
That
I love how
hurt.
every time we kind of like go into sort of like a, what would you call it? Not Cockney, but
Australian.
no, you do Australian, but then like you add a little bit of
something.
Oi.
I'll say
Oh yeah, there you go.
so I'll say this. It sounded a little more like a Taika Waititi.
Well, that's
But
because
he is
they're also New
he's
Zealander.
a New Zealander, yes.
It's a load of
But it
wingnuts.
also still sounded very like Australian.
Look,
Yeah.
man,
It was a good effort.
I can't do accents very well, so I thought it
You
was
can
pretty
do
decent.
a good Christoph Waltz though,
Yes.
Yeah,
That
that
was
was great.
good.
That was
And
good.
Elmo.
and Elmo.
And the Cookie Monster.
Cookie?
All right.
The Rock?
We're done. Yes, 5 stars on Apple, as David said. Also, we got a Patreon.
Do we?
And yes, we do. And that's very important, especially considering we will be having an awards show following this episode, covering all the past 8 films that we talked about, all the films in the Monkey Business miniseries. That's Planet of the Apes 2001. That's the Rise, Dawn, War for the Planet of the Apes trilogy. The Legend of Tarzan.
Rampage.
Tarzan, the 1999 animated movie. Rampage, the Dwayne Johnson movie. And this final one, King Kong. Yeah, so we will be giving all those films their meaningless awards during our show. It's a fun time. So yeah, if you're a Patreon subscriber, you get access to that. So look forward to that.
It's like a night at
I mean,
the
I'm just saying, if
Oscars.
Peter Jackson wants to come accept our award for Best Director, I'm totally fine with that.
I'm totally open
That
with
would
it.
be
Yes.
awesome.
We will give it to him if he agrees.
We'll have to design one.
I have a 3D printer somewhere.
David can give him his little like piece of paper score that we used for the episode. All right, let's get to that story. Noah, take it away.
All right. It's a 3-parter this time.
All right.
Well,
Yeah.
granted, it's a 3-hour movie. It makes sense.
Exactly my thought.
3-hour
process.
tour.
Anyways, let us begin.
It's deserted. Of course it's deserted. Place is a ruin. They're taking in! Find her!
If you haven't found her in 24 hours, there'll be nothing left to find.
King Kong. In 1933, during the Great Depression, Anne, an actress looking for good work, runs into Carl Denham, a filmmaker who is aiming to make the greatest film of all time by heading for a yet undiscovered island, shrouded in mystery. She meets Jack Driscoll, a playwright she fantasizes about, aboard the ship. A romance buds, but disaster looms as they happen upon the dreaded Skull Island.
So I feel like a lot of the conversation around this movie is centered around how great King Kong looks, but also like the length of this movie. How long it takes us to get to the island and actually see King Kong.
Oh, yeah.
This is the most polarizing aspect of the movie when you go online, where there's people that like that it takes this long, and there's people that are like, oh god, get to the fun already.
The latter being completely wrong. Sorry.
But yeah, let me get a kind of sense at where we're at on the pacing of this movie before we kind of really dive in. Do you like that it takes this long to get there? Or are you just like do you like that it sets this mood before it really changes into something else? Or do you wish, like Kong Skull Island, the newer movie, that they just get to the island within like the first 15, 20 minutes?
Well, it's weird. You almost forget you're watching King Kong. Like, you're just absorbed in the immersion. Like, it just...
You're
the
immersed
world.
in the world?
Yeah,
yeah.
The world is crazily built.
Titanic. Would you prefer to watch that movie after they hit the iceberg? Or the
Yes.
story leading up to it?
That is very true. Like
The weird thing is, you brought up Titanic, and twice while we were watching this movie, I brought up Titanic
Oh, really?
with David.
Yep.
That's funny because I wasn't even thinking
What
of
were you
it
saying,
during
Reese?
the movie.
there are boats and they do crash.
But I don't think that's the
fair
only
enough.
thing, though. There's kind of like
It's
this
the time
long,
period.
drawn-out process where you're actually interested in the drama unfolding and
Yeah.
this feeling of doom.
Yes.
Like, there is so much dramatic foreshadowing that goes on in this first act, similar to Titanic, where you kind of are wrapped up in these really kind of glowing bits of drama where
Yeah.
you don't want to see them suffer, but you know they are going to.
Yeah.
It's so interesting, and it's funny because I think the score actually accents this well.
It really does.
And we should, I guess, Howard Shore had actually composed a score for this movie before he was, he got in like a clash with, not even a clash. It's just
Creative differences.
Yeah, creative differences. That was the excuse, but his score was scrapped in favor of and they brought James Newton Howard on to do a quick score for it. And this score is it has so many undertones of kind of foreboding, even in the more like romantic scenes, like between Driscoll and Darrow. Even though they're trying to like sell this romance, the undertones of something more sinister is playing throughout the whole thing. And it's so smart when you consider it with what happens later in the movie, because the romance totally gets sidelined. It's like not even important anymore. It's like only a motivation for a character to get to another character.
Yeah.
But yeah, I actually, as much as I would have loved to hear that Howard Shore score, James Newton Howard, I think, does an excellent job of
he does.
scoring this film, and especially in the short amount of time that he was given to compose it. I think, maybe Peter Jackson was right. Like, whatever, because this score to me, it sounds like of that era, but like modernized.
That composer I've always had kind of a soft spot for, and like David will know because I have a whole playlist of movie music, and a couple of them are from the movie Dinosaur, which he did the music for, and I think the music was one of the most memorable things about that movie.
Yeah,
in fact,
definitely.
it kind of made that movie.
Yeah.
So
Literally
he's
impact.
so good. He has like these very swelling themes where he does both dramatic and a and fanciful, and then also thrilling, as well as just kind of heroic. You know,
Yeah.
he's
Yes.
kind of like all over.
Yeah, I've always thought the best scores are scores that tell a story where even if you're just listening to the music, you can kind of understand what's happening.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is this one.
I also think that, and we haven't really talked about the original movie, and I'll kind of get a poll on who's seen it or who knows anything about it. But Peter Jackson was he was the biggest, or is the biggest fan of King Kong. He quotes it as being literally the movie that got him into directing.
Aw.
Like, he saw King Kong and was like, I am going to direct movies. Like, and I think he actually tried to make his own little King Kong movie with like stop motion when he was like 12 years old.
I
or
can
something.
just imagine a little kid, Peter Jackson, just like, I love King Kong.
It's also the first movie he tried to make, and then before Lord of the Rings, and they're like, "Psh, no.
Well, the funny thing is we're now talking about two films that have inspired Peter Jackson. The other one was Harryhausen, like the Jason and the Argonauts, and Clash. Not as much Clash of the Titans. It was more Jason and the Argonauts. But those two movies really like lit the fire under Peter Jackson's ass.
Right.
Where it's just like, this is what I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
But especially King Kong, like that's right at the top. So when he was offered this role or the role of director by Universal, I think they had seen his movie. It was either Heavenly Creatures or The Frighteners. He at first didn't accept, but then like it was nagging in his brain that if I don't accept this, they're going to give it to someone else and they're going to mess it up. So he came back and he was like, yeah, I'll do it. And this was like in the mid 90s.
Crazy.
Yeah, and they actually did a whole lot of production work. He and Philippa Boyens and
Fran Walsh.
I don't know if Fran Walsh was there. I think but yeah, it was probably those three again. And sorry if I'm completely wrong on that and you're listening and screaming at me. But I think they made a quick script. It was completely different from what we got in this one, by the way. But they were just doing it to like get it out there so that they could start work on this thing. And Universal kind of got cold feet. They did approve like this massive budget for them. In fact, it's weird because they were the ones that they were seeking out Peter Jackson to here, we want you to do this. And then they got cold feet because the Matthew Broderick Godzilla movie was coming out, and there was some other, like the new Planet of the Apes was
Probably
also
in
in production.
Yeah.
And he was actually offered director's seat on that one as well, Planet of the Apes. Like everyone wanted Peter Jackson at this point.
But this is before he did Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, he was like at the time he was probably up and coming. You know, they probably saw that he had talent and they're like, "Hey, maybe we should get this guy on our project."
A real Denis Villeneuve.
Yeah, this was this was his real passion project though.
Yeah.
Like King Kong's or at least the thing that made him want to direct. Lord of the Rings might be his actual passion project, but the chance to work on King Kong is definitely like second in that tier. But the movie got sidelined because the studio was worried that Godzilla would like eat up the profits, and we know how that went. That movie was kind of a disaster. Planet of the Apes as well. There's like Mighty Joe Young was out there as well.
It was
yeah.
just oversaturated with kind of monster related films.
Yeah. So King Kong got sidelined, which I think is for the better because it was going to be a high-end CGI production. You think about 1998, yeah, we have Titanic that we already referenced, and that movie looks extraordinary. Mm-hmm. But I feel like if this had come out in the late 90s, it might have been great, but I feel like there would have been still some of that like CGI wonkiness to it. But yeah, then Peter Jackson does Lord of the Rings, finally gets all that sorted out, and then Universal is like, please come back. We will give you King Kong. And that's kind of where we find ourselves here. He was given like full creative freedom to do whatever he wanted. There were so many times where the studio was kind of like scared about the project because it was going over budget and the movie was really long. And every time they'd come in or the executives would come in to check in on it, they were like, oh no, this is really good. Keep doing what you're doing. Like, but yeah, that's, I kind of lost track. I went into a whole history lesson.
Yeah, so
But-
yeah, we're just kind of like doing a little bit of history before we talk about the actual story, I
Yeah.
guess, which makes sense, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but-
we were
and-
talking about
and-
the
yeah.
beginning of the movie and
Yeah.
how it sets up.
And the connection I did want to actually make was that he is, in this movie, he is trying to be very faithful to the original, but updating it to today's standards.
Yeah.
There is
This is like the definition, or it fits the definition of homage.
Yes, exactly.
He's trying to make all of the right necessary changes to make it palatable to a modern day audience, while really kind of strictly adhering to the trajectory of the story and like the meaning behind King Kong. Like and I think, even though I haven't seen the first King Kong in forever, I have seen it. It's been a very long time, and maybe I should have like refreshed before this episode, but I didn't. Do y'all know how long that movie spends its time in the city before they go to see the Kong? David's like surreptitiously pulling out his phone.
We can look it up, and you can just
It's
cut this out.
It's a minute. Well, at least in the extended edition.
No, in the
No, the
original.
Well, I know.
All right, the
I'm just
original
saying.
movie's only 2 hours long, so
Gosh,
you know that
I
they-
watched an extra hour.
over an hour.
No, the original.
I'm talking about the original
1933.
Oh. I was gonna say, how did they even do that?
is like 15 to 20 minutes.
Okay, I was gonna say that's literally insane.
So yeah, this movie definitely spends more time in New York. But I agree with you, Noah, when you reference Titanic.
Yeah.
Jurassic Park was kind of the other comparison
Oh,
where they
yeah.
go to
Yeah.
this island.
Yes.
And that one, they
yeah.
don't really spend, a lot of time beforehand, but they're exploring the island there.
Yes.
But yeah, so
However,
you were asking everyone, if it's too long for each person.
Yeah.
Yeah. What did y'all think about the pacing? Like, do you... I got a couple of you, but AJ, what did you think about just it being a whole hour before you really get going on the
Island Adventure.
the flights
So-
of fancy?
I'm split, honestly. So I think it's good to know what you're getting into before you sit down and just kind of, like, if you expect a action King Kong movie, just pure action, quick and easy, then you're going to be like looking at your watch, like, what's going on? But if you go into this, like, knowing that, yes, this is essentially Peter Jackson's, like, raison d'etre, I can't speak French. Like, it's his, what got him into, yeah. And, like, he has, like, a lot of the props that he collected personally, like the big cameras and that used, like, in the original, and they even thanked the original crew. Like, this, I would venture to say, was more important to him than Lord of the Rings, because it's such a huge passion project for him. And so
Yeah.
that's important to know, because he wants to do it faithfully to the original. He wants to do, a true remake, honoring the original, not, calling credit to himself, I would think,
Right.
while still improving and making a good art piece, kind of thing. So knowing that, yes, I think the length is appropriate. You just have to know going into it that what you're getting into.
Yeah, I will say I watched this in 2 sittings, and it is very easily digestible that way.
Right.
Like, if you take any single segment of this film and watch it, it is highly watchable and entertaining. It's just the fact that there's 3+ hours of it.
Right.
That just, no matter what you're doing, that's just a long sit.
And that's what happens
3
when you
hours,
deep
20.
dive into every single, all the minutia, the details, down to, each character and the
Yep.
setting, even the natives on the island, and making everything authentic. It takes time to do that work. And,
Oh, yeah.
Peter Jackson wants to make it authentic. That's his priority over, just a popcorn movie. So,
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the part of the reason I love this section being so long is because this is one of those few movies where you do have a damsel in distress and it works in their favor. Mm-hmm. I think it was very important, and they were very aware of creating Anne Darrow as a central character and allowing the audience to get to know her better.
Yes.
yeah.
Because she is such a force in this film, even though like a lot of her work on the island we'll talk about later is very limited as far as speech. Like, because you got to
Very.
know her, it really passes through her body language and how she interacts with King Kong later.
Yeah.
So it's I love her character, and Naomi Watts I think was the perfect cast for this role.
And
What I love too is when she's in New York, it's almost like, I don't know, it like she really starts to find herself when she gets to the island, and like the real performance starts to come through.
Right.
But in New York, it's almost like, yeah, she's kind of scraping to get by, but it almost feels like she's not, you know, happy. She hasn't.
Right.
She likes comedy. Obviously, she likes entertaining, but there's something missing. You know.
Well, it just kind of goes back to that authenticity, and forgive the phrase, but it sets the stage appropriately.
Right.
Where we have a starting point and we really know what society is like at that time. We see multiple people trying to get by, the scenery and, the building of the Empire State Building. And I'm sure David's got trivia for that, but like establishing the society at the time,
Right.
and then contrasting it to the journey and contrasting it to the wild of Skull Island, and then bringing it all back into society where you see those differences and the alien of what the modern or contemporary society is.
Yes.
That really embellishes the spectacle of it, where it is the eighth wonder of the world.
Right.
If you don't establish New York City and the people at the time, I mean, you go walking through the soup lines and everything, like seeing everything, all the scenery is so important in laying that groundwork.
Oh yeah.
Where we really appreciate this, when we see Kong, just kind of slumped on the chains on stage, it hits home harder.
Yes.
And what was the other thing I was going to say is, I don't know if it was my TV, what are the settings might have been, like the motion smoothing or whatever, but I feel like there's a stylistic choice when it's going through in New York City and stuff. I know that Peter Jackson controversially used HFR, high frame rate, for the Hobbit stuff, which kind of has a soap opera effect if you don't know what that is.
Yeah.
It's almost hyper realistic, and it's kind of unnerving because it's too realistic.
Right.
But I kind of got that sense, and this again might just be my settings on my TV, but it might have been an intentional thing where that's kind of hyper realistic when we're in New York, and then once we move to the island, it's almost more of a cinematic fluidness with a traditional 24 frame rate, because he's filming the movie. And so it's this spectacle while they're finding this story. And then once we come back to New York, it's back to the higher frame rate where it's kind of more in your face and realistic.
I definitely got a sense that there was a different approach to each location. The hustle and bustle of New York City it feels much different. I didn't notice specifically, like it to me, it didn't strike me as high frame rate, but it was definitely like, what I did notice though is like from the moment they get to the boat and they're making their way to the island and then they're on the island, there's almost this like, it starts to lull you. It's like the frame rate, or not the frame rate, it's almost like in very mild slow-mo. Where
they have some slow-mo for sure.
No, but like it almost seems like everyone is just taking it a little slower. Like it's like it's so negligible how little slow-mo it is, but it feels like they just dialed it down ever so slightly.
Yeah.
Just to like just to dramatize it. I don't know.
Going back to the intro scene, I wanted to comment on the choice of music to play. Like, well, like before that, they actually have that song, "I'm Sitting on Top of the World."
Oh yeah.
And in combination with like the Hoovervilles and things like that, where it's just this idea of when you look back at this time period, there's sort of this glitz and glamour that happens, but rarely do you actually see what's really happening behind those scenes, where everyone's kind of like pretending everything's happy and we're looking to the future, everything's bright. Yeah. But then meanwhile, you just have the poor outside, like really struggling to get by, and this kind of cannibalization of the city, you know, where it's feeding off the poor, and the rich are literally eating these big meals like right next to windows where people are walking by. And
Hoovervilles.
it's just, so
the
it's
shots alternate. You know, like the poor on the street versus the pretend on stage.
Yep,
The
exactly.
false sense of, happiness and stuff. And then, like you said, kind of behind the scenes where they're going back and behind stage and you're right.
And with her seeking work and just saying, well, put your body to use pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're
And,
forced to these kind of dire situations against your own moral code. But it's just I think this is one of my favorite intros for a movie. Like it's so memorable and it almost immediately gets you into the sense of this film. And I just had to comment on that because it's one of my favorites.
No, glad you did. And let's quickly get through a little bit of the plot here. Just
Well, did everybody answer the question?
about the pacing? I think most of us touched on that. Did anyone feel like they had anything else?
I feel like mostly we were. I like the pacing, but
David, were you okay with the
pacing
length?
was great.
Okay.
Yeah. Pacing was. I mean, it's a long movie, but it does not feel 3 hours.
Yeah, I think the pacing for this movie is perfect. Others might not work as well, but because there's such a great sense of foreboding, it works.
Well, the thing is, I agree with what you said too, AJ, where it was like, if you know what you're getting into, this is a 3-hour movie and it's this guy's ultimate passion project, and you prepare yourself for that, then it's perfect. But yeah, if you're like, hey, buddies, come over, let's watch King Kong, and without them even knowing like what they're getting into, and then just putting on a 3-hour movie and then being like, what the F, dude? Like, I get it, what is this, Apocalypse Now? The Redux? Yeah. All right, so in the story, we've kind of touched on a lot of it already because we always kind of instinctively, I feel like we'd like to just get our big thoughts out, which is perfect. But so we have Ann Darrow, who's a struggling performer.
Vaudevillian.
Vaudevillian. We have Jack Driscoll, who's a writer, a successful writer. Ann Darrow kind of looks up to him. He's one of her idols. We also have Carl Denham, another struggling filmmaker, but he goes about life in a bit of a different way. I'll just say
That's Jack Black.
He's
So in an act of desperation, Carl Denham is about to get his picture shut down because they do not like the footage he's brought to them, or the studio executives don't like the work he's brought in, and they want to scrap his picture. So he takes Preston, his
film guy,
little helper dude.
What a perfect name. He really is a Preston.
He looks like a Preston. Finds the actress they wanted for the part isn't available. They go through rattle off a few lists. There's a reference to the original Kong with Faye Dunaway. But he sees Ann Darrow outside of kind of a burlesque area. She's not going to go in, but she sees that this is not what she wants to do. That guy who gave her this hookup was kind of a piece of trash. But that's where they meet up. He buys her dinner and says like, hey, I've got this movie going on. We're going to be filming in Singapore.
I love him and all of his crookedness.
Like, he's the most likable villain.
Yeah,
Like, he's a villain, straight up.
No, he is.
Especially by the end of this movie.
Oh, yeah.
Like, but you're like, it's Jack Black. I just
How
like,
is he
I like
a villain?
him.
How is Jack Black the guy in this movie?
I know. But yeah, he's basically the ultimate con man, and he gets all these people, or he hoodwinks all these people into being on this ship to actually go off to this unknown location on this map to film this whatever the heck he's got going on, this movie. So yeah, they make their way onto the ship, or they make their way out towards this location. So that's kind of where we're at in the plot. Jack Driscoll is also kind of, roped into it because Denham kind of does this whole like, oh, I'll write you a check. You can, and the whole like delaying the setting off of the ship.
That was pretty good.
I think the way that they introduced characters for this movie was perfectly done.
Oh, it's so
Yeah.
The editing in this movie is perfect.
Yeah.
Just the way it intercuts between different characters and shows you, that little slice of life, and then convenes them.
Yes.
So good. And this, I think this is, before we move on to the next part of the story, this is a good time to talk about the rest of our cast members. We've kind of talked about Naomi Watts, But let's talk about Jack Black and Adrian Brody as Carl Denham and Jack Driscoll, respectively. So this is kind of an unexpected role for Jack Black at this point. He was kind of fresh off of School of Rock. He's only known as like kind of the comedy guy, the funny guy.
I think he did Shallow Hal by this point.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I
don't know.
think so.
Yeah.
I think Shallow Hal was before this.
Yeah, so this is
Regardless, he was
2005.
known for comedies.
Yeah.
And pretty much nothing else.
Yeah.
What did y'all think about Carl Denham?
It's complicated because I love having him in this movie, yet at the same time, even since watching it for the first time back in theaters, I had a struggle trying to separate Jack Black from Denham. Like I kept seeing Jack Black and I couldn't really convince myself that he was living in this time period. That's my only issue with him. Otherwise, I do enjoy this levity that his character brings. Even though he is a villain, it's like you like him, but seeing this sort of mad struggle, later he's referred to as a cockroach, basically, and admits he is a cockroach. But, and he really is.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's
Go
like, it kind of puts the whole underdog thing on their head. Like, he starts out like you want to sympathize him because he's up against his big cheeses, but then he's also, a sleazebag, so.
yeah. And I think going back to my comment, I don't think he's wrong for the part. I just think that he has such a strong personality off
iconic.
screen that it's very difficult to try and see him in this more subdued character without I'm kind of like inserting his comedy myself, kind of like I do with Jim Carrey sometimes in his more dramatic roles.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
I see that.
I am overall very positive on him. Like
Yeah.
I really like his inclusion in this movie. But when you think of Jack Black, he has such a big personality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That it's hard for him
I think
to
Jim
shed
Carrey
that.
was a
That's-
good comparison.
Sorry.
But then you disconnect the name from his role in his actual performance, and you realize this is probably the vision Peter Jackson had for this
No,
character.
yeah, that's why I said it's not really his acting or the fact that he's wrong for the part. It's just the association. He already
Yes.
has a brand. What were
Yes.
you saying, AJ?
Yeah, and that's where I kind of have a little bit of a leg up because I'm not a huge fan of Jack Black's brand of comedy, this is actually my favorite role of his.
I agree.
Aside from maybe Poe and Kung Fu Panda, but
yeah,
I really like him in
sorry.
this.
If you don't like Nacho Libre, get out of my face.
I
has a
personally
place.
like Jack Black, but this is still my favorite role of his.
Here's the thing. We'll move on to the other actor here in a
Right.
second.
it's going to be a 3-hour-long podcast.
I know.
Sorry.
This is not to discredit his performance at all. It is literally just because he has such a big personality.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you just can't overcome it. And I think it's a positive and intentional choice on Peter Jackson's part. Because I think that this movie is trying to, I actually like the difference between him and Driscoll. They're both struggling artists, but they go about it in a completely different way. Jack Driscoll, he's actually trying to he cares about the art. He's like, he feels it in his bones. Like, this is what he was meant to do. Like, he doesn't care if he makes a single penny on what he does, as long as he's happy and he can express himself through this art. Denham, he's doing it for the fame and he's doing it for the money. He's like, I need to make a name for myself.
He's a showman.
And that is why I love that you have Jack Black in this. He's a big personality. Like, he has to be. Like,
Yeah.
he's selling himself.
I
He's-
100% agree with
He
that.
is like a snake oil salesman, basically. But
Well, he did say
sorry, go
that
ahead.
P.T. Barnum was slightly an inspiration for this character, aside from
that makes
greatest
sense.
showman.
Oh, yeah.
So the
yeah.
interesting thing about his character is that he's also not so black and white in that area. And when you think about it, his argument against those executives that are saying like, hey, you know, like, where are the boobs? Where's the, you know, the cool shots? What's going to get us money?
The chongas.
Like, he's definitely, this character is one that he becomes a victim of his time because everyone's like, we need money, we need profit, you know? So he starts trying to work in that direction. But even in his argument against them, he's saying like, where's the art? You know, like, where is the passion kind of a thing? So his argument to make this film is that you need a passion for the art. And he's kind of like, there are some people that hide behind that, that motto, you know, but really they are still money grubbing, you know, like it's
That's
what
they
really weird.
use to get the real artists onto the project.
And it may have even started that way. Like I like to think of his character as one that did start as like, I have a passion for the arts, but because that doesn't make money, he started to think the way the higher ups do.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's funny because for this one, I mean, at some point he does mention the money. That's way later, but I actually do think his purpose at that point was to make a great work, and he was willing to do anything to do it. However, how he got to that great work didn't matter as much.
Yeah.
Like, he was willing to step over people,
Right.
he was willing to cut corners, and but he did want to be revered as one of the greatest filmmakers.
Yeah.
He's willing to
And-
get dirty.
Yeah.
To,
Yeah.
you know.
So I don't think he cares that much about the money. I mean, he does, but I think more is
The
the filming
fame, yeah.
and the fame.
It's the status.
and yes, the status.
But now let's pivot over to Adrian Brody here. This is kind of like a triple hander with these three main characters. There's no actual real main character in this other than, unless you really want to say Kong. I don't even think
I would
that-
argue Kong and Anne.
Yeah,
like,
that's the central relationship. But there's no like, oh, here's the leading man or leading lady.
right.
But Adrian Brody, how do we feel about this performance? He was like also kind of well-known star at this time. He's not in too much anymore, but he was
The Pianist.
Like, he got the
Yeah.
he won the Oscar for The Pianist. A big name at the time for sure. What do y'all think about his performance?
I really liked it, actually.
He
Yeah.
fits the kind of pretentious writer.
I don't think he's pretentious.
He
Maybe not,
they
but-
definitely allude to his pretensions, but then he sees her and he's like instantly in love, and then he loses the pretentiousness.
Weird. I never got that vibe.
Well, no, literally. Okay,
He just
maybe
seemed like somebody
pretentious
who
is
was
the-
very passionate about what he
Yeah,
does.
maybe pretentious is the wrong word, but he's very, very particular.
I guess we could also talk about the fact that his character was altered, you know, for this film. Like,
Was it?
Driscoll was actually a first mate, I think, on the
Yeah.
ship.
Interesting.
But then they turned him into the writer.
Yeah, there was a lot of like reconfiguring of from the original movie, like people's roles in that movie, and the original script for this movie. But yeah, I didn't realize that though.
I think that was one of the small differences in there, and that David and I were watching kind of a video. Would you call it an essay or just kind of a breakdown?
Or a breakdown analysis,
Yeah.
whatever.
So they had referenced that, and the fact that Driscoll's character from the original was kind of split into several characters in this film. So, like, kind of a lot of the members on the ship, too. I think in order to kind of break away from the stereotype in the beginning and have Driscoll more, you know, personally invested in this trio of people, I think making him the writer made a lot of sense, because that kind of developed Denham's character as well as his own. And, I'm sorry, there are so many things that I'm remembering now.
I know, there's
but
Jack Black wore a wig the whole movie.
yeah, but the thing that is so interesting about these characters getting all on this boat at the same time is that the way this movie is filmed, you see each moment when they actually chose their own fate, you know? Like,
Yeah.
it wasn't, they were kind of wrestled into it, but at some point they did have a choice,
Yeah.
and they still went, like,
Yep.
including the captain
Yeah,
of the
you're right.
ship.
There's
So-
Ann Darrow's moment where she decides to take that final
Oh, I
step.
love that scene.
despite all the kind of warnings
Yeah.
of like, even the captain's like, are you sure you want to do, like, I don't
Yeah.
remember exactly what
No
he said,
one
but
would
he's
take
like,
no one would take this risk lightly.
Yeah,
or something.
it makes me think of Cabin in the Woods, where it's like,
Oh, yeah.
no, the people have to make the
The
choice
Oracle.
themselves. Yeah, it's like, why do you think we put that guy out there?
yeah.
Then you have a pretty good Jack Black line that's
Yeah, Driscoll said if you really loved it, go ahead.
yeah, if you really loved it, you would have jumped.
Exactly.
Which is such a
Referring
good
to
line.
jumping off the boat and
Right,
swimming through
yeah.
the water to get back on land.
Such
Yeah,
a
yeah.
good start. I'm
Right.
like
It is great.
I would get chills at that moment.
All
where
the
I'm like,
players are
"Ooh,
set."
here we go.
And then when
Yeah,
they
that water's
first
pretty
see the
cold.
wall, it's just
yeah.
Yeah. So
it's great.
just as they're trying to avert course, the captain's been, he's like, no, we're not doing this. We're gonna go back. They've received word that, Jack or John Denham, sorry, Carl Denham is up to some tomfoolery. Let's just say it that way. And the captain's like, no, we're turning
Monkey
back.
business.
Monkey business. Yes, there you go.
Denham
He's
is
gone
like
a little bananas.
Denham. Denham is like the devil on their shoulder, basically.
Yeah, he is.
I love how, gosh, sorry, it's later on, but I love that moment where one of his crewmen gets stampeded on, and he's just like, and we'll finish this movie for
donate-
him. We'll donate the proceeds to his family.
He does it twice.
And then that one guy's like, here.
But yeah, just as they're trying to avert course, it's too late. They're in the mists, and the ship starts to hit more shallow water, and it becomes too late. They're gonna crash, and they start to slow down, but it's not enough. They hit a rock, and they are at the island, Skull Island.
School.
We can move on with the plot unless y'all have any thoughts on this, like this whole kind of ship sequence.
Kyle Chandler. I just like him
That's right,
making
Kyle
the,
Chandler.
using the comb
He's-
to make the mustache in the mirror.
Oh,
Yes, that's one of the
That's one of my
best.
favorite scenes.
That is the best moment of comedy in this whole movie, I think. Just the scene where he goes back into his chamber or his room, only to discover that someone, and we know exactly who it is Jamie Bell's character, has just drawn all over his famous movie posters, like messed up his face in all of them. And he sees one of them where a mustache is drawn on his...
Burt Reynolds.
And he's
Think
like,
Burt Reynolds.
And he's like, hey, I like that.
That actually might be good.
It's so dumb, but it still doesn't break the immersion of the movie.
It doesn't.
Exactly.
Well, because it is kind of realistic. Like some
Yeah.
people do that
I
in the
would
mirror
totally do
in their
that.
room alone.
Yeah.
And especially a pompous, arrogant actor like that.
David's an actor?
Yeah.
I'm arrogant?
Also, this is our first... It's not quite an action scene, but this kind of shipwreck scene, we're getting our first taste of, what the type of spectacle that we can
Yeah.
expect from this movie. And I have to say, it still holds up to today's standards. Like, you can tell certain points are CGI, but you could release this movie today and it would play. Like,
Right.
I wouldn't question too much of it. I think some of today's CGI is worse than this movie. But like the shipwreck scene is good. It's exhilarating. I'm like, oh no, here we go.
There's some bad CG in this.
There is, and we will definitely talk about it in the second part. But for the most part, I think this movie gets by. With that said, let's continue with that old plot there.
Let's get to the island.
Indeed. Upon arriving on the island, the Voyagers are faced with ancient ruins. As they explore the area, they are ambushed by a native tribe. Anne is captured and offered up as a sacrifice to the beast. Some weird chanting and a drum roll later, and Anne finds herself with a gorilla protector named Kong, who takes her to his domain. Jack vows to rescue her, and some of the crew accompany him. The rescuers are picked off one by one as Anne attempts her own escape. Unfortunately, this doesn't bode well for her, and Kong is forced to protect her from 3 ravenous T-Rexes. After Anne is saved, she is taken back to Kong's domain. Jack finds her at last, and they return to the boat with King Kong in tow. After reaching the others, Kong arrives, a struggle ensues, and the eighth wonder of the world is put to sleep.
So this is when the movie really kind of kicks into high gear for me. The structure of this film is very, like, you can make really clear cuts
Yeah.
between the points. Like, there's the first act is, New York and the boat making their way to the island. And then there's this is the action sequence of the adventure, discovery, action, all that stuff. Just give all of it to us, like, just throw it all out there. But yeah, they make landfall. We encounter some of the creepiest natives I've ever seen in a movie.
They did a good job.
As far as this scene goes, the whole slowly seeing like one tribal native at a time and then progressing into just this horrific scene of
It was
like
almost
them bashing a guy's head in. And
it was
then-
almost like, it made me think of Temple of Doom, Indiana
yeah.
Jones, where it's
Yeah.
just like, we are in this area that we should not be, and
Yeah.
these people are on a different level.
They're on a different level for sure.
Hotep.
And then the whole it's very interesting the way they crop up, because there are so many examples of this tribe being so much larger than just a tribe. For instance, like, there are so many carvings that you see arriving upon the island that, like, that
Oh, the
they
production
had to have
design
gone
is so
out
well
there.
done. Like,
And-
there's so
Oh,
much
yes.
stuff. There's like so many
Yeah.
little, like, blink and you miss it shots that
Yeah.
are like, a lot of money was put into that one
Oh, yeah.
like production shot.
Well, also, like, that when you think about it from a realistic perspective, there is a stone wall that's been crafted all around the island. And when they first come upon the island, they don't see any people. It's like a civilization that's been deserted. And then they sort of crop up at night,
Yeah.
which sort of gives me this... it's more supernatural and ghostly than it is real people living here, almost. So I remember watching this for the first time, and that scene just really disturbing me.
Oh,
So
yeah.
like I was surprised because, my only example of a Peter Jackson film was Lord of the Rings, which does get intense, but it's like a heroic adventure intensity. But this was just like, oh, I didn't know he could go that far.
Yeah. Well, and even in Lord of the Rings, they had beheadings, but
Yeah, but it's
this was-
different. The portrayal
yeah,
is different.
This
it-
was pretty messed up.
And this was
too.
which shows you this was very intentional. Like,
Yep.
it was intentionally so you can, and the actors going through this, or the characters going through this, he changes the camera style when they're first captured, where there's just kind of this shock where they don't even know how to react because they've never encountered anything like this before. So there's just this kind of PTSD aspect where, like, you're in the middle of war or something and seeing everything in slow motion, kind of, just
And that-
in shock.
I was going to bring that up. I mean, that kind of stuttering slow-mo effect is kind of a technique that Jackson's used, I think, in some of the Lord of the Rings movies, too.
Yeah, he did.
Yes. It's a
yeah.
Popular early
And I'm
Ridley-
actually
Ridley Scott
not a
as well.
fan of it, personally.
Oh, I hate it.
I'm not a fan either. Ridley Scott does this too. If you've seen, I mean, obviously you've seen Gladiator, but he uses that in Gladiator as well. And
also
whenever
an
that
ocean
happens,
The opening scene of Gladiator, it's still a little bit smoother, and it kind of makes more sense there. Here it was a bit more jarring.
Yeah.
I
It
have
was
to.
more like you wouldn't steal a car.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the same slow-mo.
It was
movie.
at the time kind of, it felt like it was a trendy style, and he uses it throughout this film in different points. But this was the part where I think I liked it the most, because it was being used for the purpose of
To disorient you.
This is to disorient you. This is like the character's perspective, and it kind of helps reinforce that state of shock where you're just kind of freezing up in a really tense situation.
Yeah, I liked the way you. The way you said it, Irina, makes a lot more sense than I had been thinking of it in my head. I previously agreed with AJ, where it was kind of just, that's an interesting choice.
Don't know if I would have done it.
Don't know if I would have done it. And for me, that was one of my slight nitpicks for this, along with the fact that Ann Darrow is flung around like a freaking
Ragdoll.
yeah.
like a Barbie
She
doll
doesn't get
with
any
a
whiplash or
toddler.
concussions or anything.
And she's perfectly
No,
fine.
her neck would have snapped.
It
I love
absolutely
how
would have snapped.
I love how she's like dangling there and she keeps trying to pull at the ropes and can't budge, but he takes her and pretty much like snaps her off of that frame. I was like, her arms would have come off.
Oh yeah, exactly. That's So those are kind of my only
Qualms.
my only qualms with it.
And,
Other than that, I
Or how they survived
don't really.
through the night in this place, even one night.
So I think this is where you
Don't
have
have
to
an issue.
kind of accept the source material.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly.
To bridge that gap, because there are so many moments where
Yeah.
it feels like this is an impossible space or this is the physics are off, but you still buy it because there's that kind of old Hollywood feeling to it where you're just
like journey to the center
this
of
is
the earth almost.
this is just an adventure.
Yeah.
You know, you got to accept that.
Let me catch us up real quick
Yeah,
on the
sorry.
plot so we can get into the Kong stuff. So the group encounters the natives. Carl Denham offers them chocolate. Not having it.
Sound guy gets stabbed through the chest.
That was
Gosh, that was so sad.
That was the biggest.
the way they do it too. It's like no sound whatsoever.
Yeah.
You just kind of hear him like have a gasp of breath, and it's you see it. But the group gets separated and gets captured, and is offered up to Kong by the natives as their kind of ritual that they do to kind of appease him. He's kind of looked on as what I would assume is like a god of the forest or the island or whatever.
Makes you wonder how many they sacrificed to him in the past.
Yeah, probably a lot.
And maybe that's why their grouping is rather scarce.
Yeah. In the meantime, Driscoll and Denham gather up a posse, gather up a group, and they head out to go get Anne. And there's ulterior motives involved. Carl Denham's more intrigued by just this island and getting these amazing shots, whereas Driscoll's actually trying to get Anne back. So that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah.
Where we're at, we get our reveal of Kong finally. It's been like over an hour, but we finally see him. What are y'all's thoughts when they first truly start to reveal Kong? Like we see him first, kind of the shrouded up close shot when he takes her, and then we see the when she kind of comes to and wakes up, and we actually get our full-fledged look at Kong. What were y'all's thoughts?
This is 2005?
I know, right?
Actually, I only say that because as I was watching it with Reese the other night, he's like, guys, 2005. 2005.
Yeah,
I think-
that was ridiculous.
Something that is really reflective of the way Weta Workshop operates and just Peter Jackson films in general is they really, really put emphasis on computer-generated characters as individual actors. Like, it's so easy to just kind of input a computer graphic character, but here they have so many visual cues as to a physical story behind King Kong, where like his jaw is crooked, he has broken teeth, he has so many scars.
Yeah, I love how distinctive his face is. Like
Yeah.
how imperfect it is.
It's not just a generic gorilla
Yeah,
face.
exactly.
It's like he's you can see where maybe he broke a jaw from some kind of scuffle.
What I love is you see all these scars on his body, and he adds to those scars throughout the movie.
Yeah.
Like he has the fight with the V-Rexes. They're not T-Rexes, they're V-Rexes.
Oh, my apologies.
But yeah, he adds a scar to his body, and they emphasize that, or they don't emphasize it too, but if you're looking, you see all these scars
Right.
on his bodies, and you're on his body, and you're like, oh, he's had so many of these encounters.
Yeah.
And this is just another one that
And-
just adds to the bunch.
Something that comes across as threatening over time seems very endearing, and you start to realize, wow, this big creature is just as beaten up and battered as can be. So
He's like
and
chewing
he's still
the
surviving,
bamboo.
and he's alone. You know, like I just the performance is so good because it's a character that can't talk, but like all his surroundings kind of talk for him.
His mannerisms and That's,
Did you say bananarisms?
Bananarism.
He didn't, but
His
let's
nannerisms.
coin that.
My ear heard that.
His
Like,
nannerisms.
Bananarism.
Yeah, they have a kind of tense first encounter where she's trying to get away from him, and he's really kind of asserting himself, and like her neck would have broken, but I love that scene where he is literally just doing this gorilla movement. Like it's just like
She's just some kind of doll.
yeah.
digi double right there.
And man, Andy Serkis, like I think Caesar from Planet of the Apes is his best performance, but I think he most disappears into this
Oh yeah.
this performance capture.
Well, that's because you can't see his actual face.
He is actually literally a gorilla. Like they do map some of his face though.
just
Yeah.
minimally.
Yeah, I think.
Which he did background research for this as well,
Yeah.
studying, and I think he bonded with one in particular.
I think I brought
love
this
that.
up in the first episode of Rise. Basically, this is where he started his journey. I know he started with Lord of the Rings, but he thought he was done. And then when he got pulled in for this, he's like, "Okay, I guess I'm a mocap guy now." I think
he didn't see himself that way.
No,
was
he
just
didn't.
like,
This
yeah.
started that career, and I also think this was the first time mocap was able to do 360. Before that, it was very direct, so he was able to do 360 stuff.
Yeah.
I do love his human character too. I mean, it's
Oh, yeah.
great as
Oh,
well.
yeah.
It's a
It's great.
caricature. I love it. The one eye closes very Popeye.
All right. So I know I would watch this, but who else would watch a Steve Irwin-esque
Yes.
show with
Andy Serkis.
Andy Serkis, and he goes
That
out
would be
into nature
great.
amongst...
I'd love it.
I can't see him doing
that
it,
would
but
be
I would totally
amazing.
watch it.
Well,
You mean Bear Grylls,
yeah.
more of like Survivor Man kind of thing instead of... Well, Steve Irwin was like more educational.
Yeah,
Like
he
he didn't
was.
go like try to survive kind of thing.
I
Right.
literally just got a Discovery Plus channel or account just so I could watch the Crocodile Hunter series.
Oh,
No,
that's great.
it's all about
yes.
battle bots, bro.
Well, if I have to watch that, I guess I will.
But
the-
Andy Serkis has that perfect energy of just being, I don't want to say animalistic, but kind of having that
Connection to
with them.
nature.
Yeah.
connection to nature or in
Yeah.
tune with them.
And he
Yeah.
has an excellent narrating voice too. Like
Yes.
he'd be perfect for it.
Speaking of, they're releasing audiobooks for Lord of the Rings again, and he's narrated.
I
He already narrated The
So-
Hobbit, which is excellent.
I started
kinda
listening
wanna
to one
listen
of
to
the
that.
the Hobbit, and I don't need to be
Yeah,
talking about
let's
this right
not.
now.
But that's good to know.
All right, so this is when we get the bulk of our action sequences throughout the movie. They're like back to back to back to back. I think some of them are perfectly executed. Others could use a little more work. So it kind of starts off with we've already met King Kong, and Darrow's had her little interaction with him. Now we have this whole Brontosaurus stampede. Yeah, Carl Denham and the boys. He's trying to get a nice shot. He comes across a scene, like a little area, an opening in this. I guess they're kind of in a canyon, and it opens up, and they find some Brontosauruses just wandering, doing their thing, and then raptors show up, and they're really weird looking raptors, but I kind of dig it. And thus they trigger a stampede. And here's my thoughts on this first sequence. I think if you took the humans out of it, it would look okay.
Yeah, yeah.
But the way that the people are just the way it's composited,
It's not composited well.
yeah, it's just off. Like they're running, and you can tell that they're not actually
They're
there
on a
with
blue
them.
screen,
Yeah.
and you can just see
Yeah.
them running in place.
Actually,
and everything is CG'd
Reese,
around them.
I mean, David, you mentioned something earlier where you were talking about how it was probably shot in a way where they just said, okay, actors, just run and
Yep.
pretend there are things around you. We'll just put it in
Yep.
after that.
Yeah.
And that's a Peter Jackson thing that he always does
we're
with
kinda-
action sequences.
Yeah, we're kind of watching it right now. Well, not
Yeah.
just kind of, we are.
It's specifically.
But I can tell you kind of what breaks the illusion.
Yeah.
And it's the fact that they're running like it's a flat surface.
Yes.
And the rest
yeah.
of it should be not flat.
Oh yeah,
so
it's very.
right.
It's,
It's
definitely
because
an uneven.
That,
plane.
and we just came from this brilliant scene of the V-Rex fight where it's so
Yeah.
well choreographed, and
Oh,
Yes.
he drops her and catches her in his foot, and they're following, and then you know, like Irina said, like he's been through this before. He knows how to defeat them by ripping their jaws apart.
Right.
So brutal. And then you go from that to like the flat running, and then you have the Wilhelm screen of the Brontosaurus falling off. It kind of-
I do think
it's-
the V-Rex happens after.
Does
I
it?
could be wrong.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, but
you're right.
no,
There's
you're.
some are better coordinated than others.
But
Right.
but what you're right about though is we've already had like a King Kong sequence. I'm pretty sure,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just looks like more attention was given to it. And this one's kind of like they had a really good idea and they executed it 75%.
Yeah.
And just didn't go quite
Okay.
all the way.
It looks
the
like it's
thing
from
is-
Journey to the Center of the Earth or something.
does.
I said that
It
earlier.
does.
I totally agree. I think the CG for the dinosaurs isn't bad, which is sad.
Exactly.
Like, I actually think the Brontosaurus is good, but the lighting and the compositing.
Yeah.
Like, okay,
Yeah.
that scene right now. I'm sorry, no one can see what we're seeing. That is the worst scene in the movie.
Yep.
Right
Okay.
there.
Yep.
Quick break for all the novices in the audience and me. What does compositing mean?
Compositing is when you're combining the people that are acting on a stage, on a blue screen, on a green screen, with a digitally made scene in CGI. So you have to match the lighting of the CG characters in the world you're in with the lighting of the people
Yeah.
that are acting. And a lot of that is done in post. You want to make it look like it's in the same space, like it's one picture.
Right.
And if it looks like they are in two different places, you didn't composite correctly.
So, why the fact that you're mentioning that is bringing me to the other topic, that the reason something doesn't fit in well. And what we were just seeing with that scene was there are those brontosauruses kind of falling on top of each other, and Denim and one of the other characters are trying to get out. And there's no change in shadow
Oh, it's
on
so
them.
bad.
Yeah, so it looks like there's just one constant light shining on them while there's a lot of movement going on around.
Yeah, and they should be shrouded in darkness.
Exactly. Or at least like moving shades,
Yeah.
you know, from the creatures. So it becomes more obvious.
It
And
seems
maybe-
like it was probably one of those last shots where it was just like, oh, we have to show them
Yeah,
getting
yeah.
out of this.
Yeah.
Like,
It's a budget thing.
Got to
too.
go with it.
You know,
Right.
that I just looking at this, this had to be an expensive.
So-
Like the thing is, they didn't not know.
Right.
You know, it was like, yeah, this isn't.
and the thing is,
100%.
there's so much good stuff in this, and I think I've watched enough films. I think the most recent Corridor Crew even touches on it. What was it with? That was the comedian Seth Rogen was on there, and they were talking about how there was like an issue with one part of his movies, and he's like, look. Honestly, if you're spending X amount of money in the rest of the shots and you need to fix something, if you just don't have a budget for it, you just like, I guess we'll hope people don't notice. And you're like, and that's one of those scenes. I think they
Yeah.
probably spent the rest of their money on the budget,
And-
and they're like,
it's
I
one of those
think-
things too. When you're go ahead.
The purpose of this particular part and scene is motion, moving you forward, and you
Right.
get quite a bit of motion. So it conveys
Yes.
that.
I agree.
There is motion.
And it's never dull. I'm glad they didn't waste it on a scene that was boring.
And not to mention, you notice it a lot more now with the advancements
Yes.
in
You're right.
animation.
Back then, I'm sure it was still good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
back then I imagine it just you might have been able to tell the same way, you know, you could tell things were hanging in old shots of
Also-
movies back in like the 40s or whatever.
Right.
Keep in mind, they
But-
didn't have like extreme high definition.
Yeah,
like they
well,
do now.
Yeah,
Right.
that's kind of what I'm getting at. So this, while it's glaring right now, would not be glaring.
It might have been
In
more
2005.
smoothed over at that
Though
time. Yeah.
this movie does look absolutely beautiful with modern 4K HDR. Like it's
Yeah.
gorgeous.
I wish I had the 4K for this. I don't. So I'm
Get
kind of
it.
jealous.
This is one worth getting. There are so many amazing shots.
Yeah,
Photography
it
is
is for the like 99% of the time. This is an absolutely beautiful movie. There are just little slight moments of CGI that I would correct.
Yeah.
You know, but for the most part, like
It's still-
it's like
Like, even though you know it's all being done on a set, you still don't believe you're outside of Skull Island. It's
Yeah.
just kind of the immersion of this world is so beautiful and well done.
and I should say it's the cinematographer is the same as Lord of the Rings. It's Andrew Lesnie. He did the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Dude, shout out to Andrew Lesnie.
Yeah,
Good
He
job.
just knows how to shoot a movie.
Bravo. Bravo.
But while we do have certain issues with this brontosaurus scene, and I don't think it's like it's a good propulsive action sequence. It just has like there's issues with it.
I do think it's one example of what ends up happening with the Hobbit films too, is like these kind of odd rollicking moments where it's just
they just keep going.
It's ever so slightly comical in its action.
It reminds me of that the scene at the it is in the first Hobbit movie where things just start to go out of control in a ridiculous way in the Goblin Cave.
Yeah.
And it just starts to like escalate, escalate, and then it just ends in this like totally ridiculous fashion where I'm like, I'm enjoying it, but I'm like, is this plausible at all?
No, it's the same thing in The Hobbit where they're escaping in the barrels and like the people are rolling.
Yeah, that's just a Peter Jackson thing.
It's a Peter Jackson thing.
Yeah, he has fun. Like you think about it in his head, he's like, what is the coolest thing that could happen right now?
Doesn't even matter
if it
works.
And
or not.
he's a little kid. You can picture him just topping it. Like, how do I keep topping the scene, the previous scene? Like, oh, and then it goes here, and then it goes here, and then it goes here. There's a lot of that.
And I have to say though, Hobbit kind of gets away with it because it has that childlike nature. I know a lot of people don't really agree with this, but I kind of disconnect it from other Peter Jackson works because it is a little ridiculous.
Yeah.
However, in that world, in the context, it's like,
It works.
Sure, it's the Hobbit. This works.
Save it for our Hobbit review.
But
Noah.
Are we doing a Hobbit review?
But when you apply that to this movie, it's harder to make it work because it's set in the real world,
Right.
and at a time not so far away.
Yeah.
So it's harder to be okay or as okay with
Right.
certain issues and ridiculous people like being not crushed by a stampede.
Right.
So despite our few issues or nits to pick with this action sequence, I think it's followed by an absolutely extraordinary action sequence.
Yeah.
The V-Rex scene.
Oh, so good.
Yes, it's not directly followed, but like we might as well get to it since we're talking about action.
We're talking about action.
Such a Reese scene.
I think this is the crowning jewel on the movie in terms of like action set pieces, where it's just you don't think so? Do you think it's the final confrontation with the planes?
Nope.
Oh, all right.
It's the stampede.
We'll get to that. I just love how this scene develops. Like it starts off, there's one T-Rex. It's a very tense moment. Anne Darrow is by herself and she's hiding, and you see this T-Rex just kind of, or V-Rex, sorry, that's just kind of sitting there. And then it slowly escalates and it takes a snap at her. She's kind of hanging from the branch at one point, and then King Kong comes in at the last minute, grabs her. And you think, oh, we're getting a 1v1, V-Rex versus King Kong. And then from behind, another one comes in, and he pulls away his fist just at the right time to keep her away from the second one. And then a third one comes in, and it's 3v1. I'm like, yeah, Peter Jackson's just having fun at this point.
Oh, yeah.
And the way that, what I love is King Kong's big, but he's not huge. Like it's not like in Kong Skull Island where he's a literal kaiju.
Right.
He's a 25-foot gorilla, whatever he is. He's tall.
Yeah.
But it's a size that is not like, nothing can overcome this.
Yeah, he's vulnerable. He gets bitten. He gets injured. Like
Right.
Yeah, and I just love how he establishes himself against his foes, where it's just like, it's not about size, it's about how you do it.
Wait,
it's like,
all right.
Not to
Reese,
mention the natural strength of gorillas.
What was the number you threw out, by the way, for his height?
25 feet.
He's literally 25 feet tall.
Okay,
I
cool.
looked up for
Nice.
this movie. Did you look that up before?
I think I read it at some
Yeah.
I
point.
was like, that's a
and
weird
it just
number to
kinda
get 100% accurate.
I think it stuck with me at one point when I read it, but yeah, he's not super big. But the way he handles these V-Rexes is just, it's so believable. Where it's like,
Skillful.
skillful. He's done. You can tell he's done this before. He's like, yeah, this is
He's like,
another.
I know how you're gonna react to me punching you in the
Yeah,
head.
this is another Tuesday for me. Like I killed a couple of V-Rexes last week. No big deal. But yeah, just seeing him, he's not perfect in his execution either. Like he gets bit a couple times. It's not like, it's just, I love it.
It's probably because he's used to fighting off 1 to 2, but then the third one appears and is like, hey, buddy.
Not juggling a ragdoll.
Yes,
Right.
that as well.
Also, this is a kind of, it's subtle, but also not subtle. But in all of their cases, he's always going for their jaws and trying to break them open. So that he's done this before.
He knows the
Yeah.
vulnerability.
He's learned through, adapting in this environment that, the way you kill these things is you, like, bust open their jaw.
It's like an oyster.
And also how he tosses them kind of around, knowing they can't,
they can't
they're not
grab
as
onto
limber,
anything.
they can't climb up things. He uses
turns
that.
in their radius so their head is constantly like trying
Yeah.
to get them, but he can't.
He's so, he's smart. I think this is...
So much thought went into it.
I love after he does kill them, or like that one where he snaps the neck, he like lifts up the jaw like he's making
he plays with it
Little
like a puppet.
ventriloquist dummy.
Yeah, but the thing, what I love is that through that action, you're like, oh yeah, he's done this before.
Mm-hmm.
It's like he lives here. He knows he's king of the island.
He's literally king. He's dominant.
Yeah, yep.
And that's where
Yeah.
when he goes back to, New York and he's so forlorn, like it's such a huge contrast.
I also think this is a great, like, kind of relationship development between him and Anne. Not romantically, obviously, but
Yeah, that's later.
Yeah.
no, this is kind of a love triangle, but in
It
a weird
is.
way. But I love the moment where it's 1v1 at the end. He's already taken out 2 of the V-Rexes, and the last one, like, it's one of them is at the left side of the screen, the other is at the right side, and they're facing off. And Anne is in the middle, and she slowly steps towards King Kong and gets behind his arm.
Yeah.
And he kind of does this brief little look down at her, like, "Oh yeah, she's with me."
No.
And then he's like,
I
"I'm
still
gonna
got
take-
it."
Yep,
Oh, it's so cute.
I'm gonna take this thing down, and I'm gonna look impressive doing it. Like what I love is he decides to add a little extra flair
Yep.
on there. He's like, I'm gonna impress her with this, and
Another moment too that it's like adds levity to it, but it's still like the seriousness of it too, and like the whole tumbling through the vines thing where one of the V-Rexes starts swinging towards her and adds that tension, and he's looking down like, oh, I gotta get down there, and yeah, it's like
Right.
there's so many aspects of this is just great.
and then the fight ends, and I just love how Kong does his thing, but then he decides to just look away from Anne. He kind of like ignores her, kind of looks back, and is like, "Yeah, you owe me an apology," is basically what he's saying, for trying to run away from me. He's just kind of looking off, waiting for her to kind of approach him, and he just starts walking away from her, and she runs to
Follows
keep
him,
up,
yep.
and then he just like grabs her and throws her on his back.
Yes.
So good.
Their relationship is so well done and developed, and I
And it's
love
actually
it so much.
when I watched this, it's actually a pretty small part of the movie.
Yeah, it
When
is.
their relationship is established and they're actually developing this, I don't know, like trust of each other. It does
Yeah.
Well
not take up
proportioned.
much of the movie.
Yeah. It's actually it's just so amazing because you kind of forget the fact that Naomi Watts was pretty much acting to something that wasn't there.
Yeah.
And the same with Andy Serkis, he's like acting to something that isn't there. And just the fact that they were able to blend those performances so well to the point where you just forget completely that they were filmed
Complete immersion.
Yeah, it's just so well done.
And
So well
the-
rendered.
And you realize it's well done. And Peter Jackson, he's a genius. He knows it's well done because this is when he gets Adrian Brody back into the picture, and he's there to rescue Anne. But you're like,
You're like, no,
I know. Don't
I know.
rescue.
Well, like you also see it in her face too.
Yeah.
Like I think one of the most interesting things that directors can do with actors is sometimes not give them lines.
Yeah.
Where it's like you are expressing an emotion where I think the audience is trying to interpret it, and it could be one of two things. And you're all like, ooh, but both work for the scene. Where it's like it could be her relieved to see him, but also disappointed.
What's great about it, though, is like, I'm not mad at Adrian Brody in this scene. He's
doing
done
what he thinks
everything
is right.
he can
Oh, yeah.
to get her back. Like, he is trying to save her. But at the same time, I'm like, no, just leave them be.
I know, right? Yeah.
Because at the same time, they've established that King Kong, he's finally like, you get the sense that he is a very lonely soul.
Yeah.
Like, he admires the beauty of the land that he lives in, but at the same time, you're like, he needs some sort of company. He's been riding solo for so long.
Well, the screenplay that she has in the beginning is literally called Isolation.
Yep.
I didn't even notice that, but that's crazy. That makes sense.
And I love that both their characters kind of reflect that loneliness where she's in her own world. There was nothing like King Kong to protect her. She was literally alone completely. But here Kong is able to, like, he's the king of the island and he actually sees her as an individual and is willing to go to great lengths to protect her, and she feels secure, and she's being given that love that she didn't have in her actual world. Like, and it's so interesting how, like, I'm on board with the romance between her and Driscoll in the beginning, but once he shows up, you, as an audience member, realize that love vastly diminishes between the bond that she has with King Kong, and it's just so weird, like, to have that experience.
Yeah. So, Driscoll, obviously, Driscoll saves, quote unquote, saves Anne. Kind of a dumb scene where he just grabs onto a bat and it just, like, lowers him down.
know.
Well, to be fair, given the circumstances, he started climbing down the vine first, and then the bats are attacking and all that, and King Kong's dealing with them, and then King Kong sees them and he's mad. He's like, oh, I'm gonna come get you, and Jack's probably gonna die. So he's like, well, screw it. I guess I'll grab this flying
I just
thing.
thought it was... Look, I like this movie, don't worry. But the scene where just the bat conveniently, like, you know, lowers him all the way down into this river, and they're like, oh,
Yeah.
we're good. It was just kind of... It was dumb. But Neil, it's a small scene in a very long movie that is mostly very, very good. So the group makes it out, and they kind of lure King Kong. And obviously Denham is there. He's convinced the captain. He's kind of learned that he's had this past of, I guess, poaching or capturing animals. And he's got all this chloroform conveniently in his ship. So he kind of, for some reason, convinces the captain that this is what they got to do. And they do try to kill the gorilla, or King Kong, because it starts to get out of hand. But Carl Denham manages to throw a big old chloroform bottle at old King Kong's face, knocks him out.
This scene hurt to watch.
Yeah, it's super sad.
And it's really sad because it's not her fault, but it feels like a betrayal for him.
Yeah.
You know?
He's reaching out for her as he's
Yeah,
passing
exactly.
out.
And
Yeah.
it's just like the first time when she tried to escape him and he was sulking.
The sad
and-
part, too, is she's like, stay. She says, don't come out here. Like, because she knows if he, like, the future in store for King Kong would be, you know, it would not be good. It's either death or you're going to be very unhappy.
Yeah.
They wisely skip over the part where they lift the ape onto the ship.
Yeah, however they did that.
Somehow get it back, but
No logic there.
yeah, that's fine.
Well, given time.
I'm glad they didn't show that or even try to show that. It's just cut to
He's the size
whatever
of the
later.
ship.
I know. he's not, but
He would take up like 90%. It feels
well,
like.
with all the humans he killed, he probably makes up the weight difference.
Oh my god.
They're humans being flung back.
They would have to make
like, all
a
the-
raft to drag him on.
I don't think he's bigger than the ship, but he is.
He's big.
There's nowhere
pretty
on this
big.
ship he's gonna sit,
At 25 feet.
bro. That's
Well,
tall. Like
It's
he would
funny
take up
that,
a
and
massive
they're aware of
space.
that too. Like early on, Carl is, when he's telling him to bring the camera, and this cameraman is like, "You want me to switch to the 6-inch or something like that, which is a small focused shot?" And he's like, "No, stick with the wide angle," because he knows how big it's going to be, and no one else really knows what they're in
Yep.
for.
I love those little touches there too. All right, so that is the cutoff point for this portion of the story. Let's finish it off, Noah.
Cool. After loading Kong onto the boat, he is brought to New York to be put on display. At the night of the premiere, a bewildered Kong breaks free from his binds and goes on a rampage in the city. Amidst the chaos, Anne arrives to calm him down, and they have a touching reunion. Before King Kong is assailed by the U.S. military, he takes Anne up to the top of the Empire State Building, and he lives out his final moments defending her atop the tower. Thus ends King Kong.
Literally.
It's so sad.
Which, David, do you have trivia for the Empire State Building?
I mean, I have one bit. I don't know if it's what you're thinking.
Yeah,
but
it is.
the fact that in the original, or no, not in the original, the 1970s version, they filmed using the Twin Towers. It's the only one that didn't use the Empire State Building.
Well, the other
fact
trivia I
you're
was
looking
thinking
for?
of
Yeah.
is they actually took longer building the Empire State Building in CGI than physically construction of the Empire State Building.
Oh, wow.
It was
I
like
didn't
something like
realize that.
13 months versus 11 months or something like that.
That's so crazy.
That's insane that someone can build that structure or people can build that structure that quickly.
13
There you go.
months, guys.
Human ingenuity, guys. All right. So yeah, this is the whole back to New York portion. Carl Denham has kind of set up he's really banking off of his King Kong discovery and capture. He's set up this show. What's his name? Baxter.
Yeah.
Baxter.
He's the main star.
Bruce
Carl's really,
Baxter.
gone just completely full into it. He's all in on just
Capitalism.
yeah. He's like there was like a slight side of him that used to be somewhat vaguely identifiable as like human and sympathetic, whereas now he's just he's
Yeah.
just living in the moment. This is like he's finally like, oh, I've figured it out. Yeah, it's yeah, and Kong looks. It is the most heartbreaking scene is just seeing him be kind of wheeled out, or the drapes opened and Kong's just sitting there, just totally depressed.
Yeah.
In just he's got the chains on his wrists,
And then they lift his arms up,
Yeah.
and this.
and his head is still
Yeah.
just down and just completely forlorn about the whole situation.
Yep.
And then he realizes it's not actually Anne, and he's like terrified.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It is so sad.
I think this movie's so bold though. And it's 2005, but it's the finale to this film is so melancholy. Anne didn't end up with Driscoll. They went their separate ways because Driscoll never like came out and did anything about it. And that's what he's kind of based his whole new play off of, is how he was never just, more forward or more, actually expressing his feelings. That's what I
That-
got at least, right?
Yeah,
Whereas-
that is an aspect, and I think upon rewatching it, I believe that the moment she kind of separated herself from him was when she was trying to stop them from capturing King Kong, and he was just holding her back, saying, "There's nothing we can do."
Yeah.
And like he basically gripped her aside.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Get off of me!" And she looks at him
Yep.
in this way, like, "You're
that's-
not the kind of man I thought you were," kind of a thing.
Yeah, which is sad because he's a good guy. In
Yeah.
this. He doesn't understand what she went through with Kong.
Right. Yeah.
Kong he didn't realize that, oh, Kong has a heart. It's like he feels too.
Right.
And to his credit, how many of them died by Kong's hand.
I know, so many of them.
Yeah.
Like, he is, in their eyes, a monster.
horrific ways, not just a easy way. I think does he eat one of them or chomp on one of them?
Oh, for sure. Like, he
Yeah.
does all sorts of things. He throws them to and fro, eats some of them.
Right.
Actually, my favorite scene, or not my favorite scene, but just one of the most comedic scenes for me was when he does finally break out of the theater and he's looking for Anne. And there's just like all these blonde-haired ladies with the same hairstyle, and he picks them up, looks at them for a couple seconds, then just tosses them aside.
I feel like you hear a splat at one point.
But it's also really endearing because it shows that he memorized how she looks.
Oh yeah. He's like, I know exactly what you're like.
Yeah, it's precious.
Well, okay, but not the tossing, but it's just the know.
So yeah, Kong breaks out in this moment. What kind of triggers him is seeing this Anne look-alike during this play. This actress is presented in front of him portraying Anne Darrow.
Yeah.
She isn't actually Anne Darrow. And he is enraged by this, that it's not her.
Well, I love that his original reaction is like, eh?
Yeah.
He kind of like leans back and he's like,
that's
you're
not
her.
not right.
And
who are
then
you?
it was like he had a lot of hope, and then he got
Dashed.
really sad.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
then that made him mad.
So
Yeah.
he breaks out of his the chains.
Combined with the flashes from cameras.
Yeah. And we get this is like what I like to say is the Lord of the Rings scene, where you remember in the Fellowship of the Ring when Sauron is like waving his mace around and people go flying.
Yep.
Yes.
Like, this is when King Kong just like is waving his fists around throughout this theater of people, and people just go flying in every different direction. And I'm
Yep.
like, yeah, Peter Jackson's having fun just killing people right now, and I love it.
I just like to imagine him off screen like,
And then King Kong breaks out into the main streets of New York and just kind of unleashes havoc. Not really because he wants to cause havoc, but because
He's just
he's a big
confused and-
25-foot gorilla and he has no idea where the heck he is, and he's looking for the one person who kind of, showed him, compassion.
It's like bull in a china shop
Yeah.
situation.
Fun action sequence, I thought, even though you know that this is going to end horribly. He finally finds Anne, who is walking out of a show that she's been a part of. I don't know. It's not really revealed exactly what it is, or is it? I don't know what it is.
Yeah, it had a title above the where it was showing, but yeah.
Yeah. And this is all while Driscoll is kind of leading Kong. He gets into like a taxi or something and just drives him around the town. And finally Kong like flips his vehicle over. It's really satisfying. But then Anne kind of comes up out of the shadows, and they get their little moment. I love this serene kind of quiet moment they have before just crap hits the fan.
Yeah.
they're sliding around on
yeah.
the ice.
It's
and-
the first
so
time
cute.
Kong's ever experienced ice. Look, there's nothing in any way gross about this relationship, but
Yeah.
it's like it's a first date almost.
Yeah.
Where Kong is like, "Oh, we're gonna go ice skating or something." Like,
Yeah.
it's not literal. Like, that's not what was planned. But
It's not. I don't think it. Maybe some weird way, but my interpretation was never in a maybe
No.
romantic from
I don't-
Kong's point of view.
The thing
but
is, it's romanticized, but it's not romantic.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
I'm
that's
saying.
what I was thinking.
Like, there's nothing
Yeah.
where it's like, oh,
Well-
this is a
no sexual
I think
tension.
I think because it breaks the stereotype of human versus pet. There
Yeah.
are so many relationships in films where it's like a human developing a bond with an animal, and so you kind of see a human pet relationship. And in this, he started treating her as a pet or just kind of a plaything, but then they're on equal footing now as
Yeah.
just separate beings,
Yeah.
just interacting in their own world, that
With love.
nobody else understands.
Yeah, and Kong experiences something completely new, and
Yeah.
this like he's probably never seen ice before,
Yeah.
and he's sliding around on it. He has this moment of like, oh, this is this is fun.
He's
He's having fun.
He's a huge fan of the slapstick comedy
Yeah.
for sure.
Only then to be interrupted by gunfire.
It's so sad.
Yeah.
Frickin' guns.
Yeah, but I mean, it's always been a tragic story. The original
Yeah.
Kong is a tragic story. But then we have a kind of another action sequence. It's not. It's more of kind of an escape, and they make their way up the Empire State Building. And Darrow is now completely like on Kong's side. Like
Right.
I will stand in front of you. What I almost love is that there's this, like, originally Kong stood in front of her in
his
Skull
world.
Island.
Right.
And now in her world, she is standing in front of him.
Yep.
But she's not
to,
big
like-
enough to block all the bullets.
Exactly. But I do love that kind of switch.
Yeah.
Where it is significant, where, yeah, now she can protect him. And there is a moment where she does save him from gunfire. She stands in front of them. They were going to shoot him, and these planes kind of divert, and they're like, no, we can't do it because she's
In the way.
there,
Yeah.
obviously. So I do love that is repaid.
It's just really endearing, though, because the whole time I keep saying endearing, but
It is endearing.
yeah, but the whole time King Kong's still trying to protect her from all this stuff, even though he's scared, afraid, and running and all that. He's trying to fight them off like they're the V-Rexes.
It's a really well executed action sequence, though, too, just from a technical standpoint as well. I love seeing the planes kind of come in, and just the way he's able to creatively like take out a couple of them before he ends up finally getting taken out. But then we get our the final moment. King Kong or Kong saves her, puts her inside the tower, kind of gives her one last look. Well, it's actually not the last part, but he does get shot again, and then he's kind of grasping onto the top dome of the Empire State Building. And one of my favorite shots in this is when they are looking eye to eye, and this was actually an intentional shot by the filmmakers, or a visual effects shot, but when you look at his eyes as he's dying, you can see the reflection at first in the eyes. And then you see the pupils dilate, and then the reflection in his eyes kind of dissipate.
Right. It's dull.
And it is the most effective a shot of showing a CGI motion capture character just looking like it loses the life from its eyes.
Ugh,
and I think it's
so sad.
Yeah, it really works, and it is so sad. And at this point, it goes so silent. He kind of falls. There's like almost no sound at all. And then we kind of have our final scene with Carl Denham. I wasn't a fan of this final line, honestly.
Oh gosh, the last line
It
sucks.
was beauty that killed the beast.
Because it really wasn't. It was a callback to the original movie. Mm-hmm. And I get like why they put it in there, but that's not the. I didn't feel like that was the
That's
message
not the
of this
line.
new movie.
It's not the line, man.
Well,
So if you look
He's-
metaphorically, like beauty, as in like not just Ann Darrow, but like what Kong has always seen as beauty, which was he would always look out on the horizon, and they would say beauty.
Yeah.
Kind of, I could see it, but
but
what were
remember,
you
this
gonna
is
say, AJ?
Carl saying it, and he's still being the showman.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
not only that, I do have to say it is accurate. It's
It
an
is
accurate
not
statement.
accurate at
Look,
all.
wait, no. How did he notice her in the first place?
What? Kong?
Yes.
Kong was killed because they brought everyone to the
No,
island.
obviously.
No,
He liked her. Yes.
Actually, Noah makes up a good point.
Which is?
The thing is, he was drawn to Anne.
Yes.
It doesn't matter if he's drawn to her. He wouldn't have died otherwise.
Okay, yeah, but the
He'd
point being,
still be
he
on
was
the
saying,
island.
yeah, he would be. If he did not have an attraction to Anne in some form, he would not have been lured to the boat. He would not have taken her to his lair and kept her alive.
Yeah, I still
She's got
don't think
strong
that's a good
pheromones.
line for the message of the movie.
I
also it's barely okay.
This is. I was
think
I was more.
Beauty
I was
killed the
talking
It doesn't
about
have
the
to be the
accuracy.
message of the
the
movie.
beast.
It's a closing line. It doesn't mean it's a thesis of the movie.
Sorry, if it's such a point. It is like the last thing you hear. It's very poignant, and then it ends, and it's like it's supposed to leave you with something, and it left me with nothing. I think it was a stupid line.
Well, it's disingenuous, which is the point of the movie, because it's this filmmaker making a story
Yeah.
based inside of dreary reality. Like
Yeah.
it's got depth to it because it's a showman saying this who's manipulative and stuff, and he says this line that's supposed to be deep and whatever, but it's kind of just
Yeah.
Cliche and wrong.
I mean,
Yeah.
it is interesting because what still happens today is a lot of people make profit off of tragedy, So, like, I think that's sort of what he's doing. He's all like, how can I spin this, And then turning it into a tragic tale in which he can still benefit in some way as I'm just the poet who, relays this story to everyone kind of a thing.
So I think the reason it didn't work for me is because it seemed like what's her name? I'm blanking right now.
Naomi Watts.
Ann Darrow is the focus of this movie and her connection to King Kong, and
she's just not
it
that hot,
ends-
according to David.
And it ends with you seeing Jack Black give this really cheesy bad line, and then it just cuts to Peter Jackson. And I'd rather it have ended on Darrow. And I think because it's her story, he is just kind of a main part to telling it. And I didn't make me think.
Here's what I'll say.
The movie made it her story, but the beginning, it was his story. He put this all in motion.
Yes, I know he did, but
It's kind of like
it became her story.
It's like him telling the story, and they are the story, and then he's at the end closing off the story that he quote unquote created.
I could
didn't
almost
work
see
for
it
me.
as him trying to take credit for the story,
Exactly.
but like, no, it's not your story. Like, that's almost how I see it.
Yeah.
Where it is more Anne and Kong's story for sure.
I guess it just leaves a bitter taste.
But like,
in your
it does
mouth.
seem like he's trying to like signature off on it at the end there.
Yeah, I know that there is a way to translate it over into a deeper thing for the movie. It just didn't work for me. It just left a bitter taste.
No,
in my mouth.
and I'm not a fan of it either. I think you could have that line, but it just needs to be done differently, or I don't know. I'm mixed
honestly,
on it.
I would love if it was Jack Black and he's like, I messed up.
I messed up.
I don't think I was never really bothered by that line. Sure, you might have been able to come up with a different one, but I was not bothered.
And I'm sure a lot of people
Ever.
agree with you.
Yeah. All right. Any final thoughts on the final act of this movie? Any last words? Or are we good?
Not on the final act, but we skipped over, I guess, what gives the V-Rex fight a run for its money is the pit with all the bugs,
Oh, yeah, we totally ignored that.
Right.
where that was actually a scene from the original that got cut and that footage got lost. And so Peter Jackson with Weta, that's actually stop motion, if I remember correctly.
Yes. No.
That is
He
so
did
technically
they did
amazing.
a stop motion version of it.
And
That
then you
is
have the
incredible.
namesake of Weta's in there as well.
Yeah, this episode's so long, so I feel like we just forgot this movie's long as well. But this sequence was so this is one of the most old school Peter Jackson moments where it was like he dipped into horror for a second. The amount of just grotesque imagery in this scene is so. There's so much of it.
The little leech creatures.
that kill Andy Serkis.
If you've ever
Those
wanted
things-
to see a really disgusting Andy Serkis death,
Yeah, those things are so. Look, CGI for me, it never gets me to cringe or feel anything other than, hey, that's CGI. But this scene was.
Yeah.
I was just seeing those little leech things grabbing onto his arms and then sucking on his face.
Yeah.
I was like, nope,
They-
get me out of here.
This is another example where, just as the inclusion of music can improve the emotion of a scene, the reduction of music
Yeah, the
or
exclusion,
the
yeah.
absence of music can really make these scenes
Yes.
pop.
And
And
they're-
that's what happened with this one.
Yeah,
was,
the music in this is so minimalist. It's
Yeah.
just it's like a dull hum
Yeah.
throughout the whole thing.
Also, the fact that it happens so slowly makes
Yeah.
it feel like some kind of torture, you
Yeah.
know? Like, this is a torture scene.
Ugh, so good. Another scene where Peter Jackson was just like, hey, Jack Black, just flail your arms around and we'll add the CGI in post. And I think it works. Like, it looks fine. But yeah, great call out, AJ. I actually love that sequence. I'm surprised we didn't talk about it earlier. We were kind of caught up in all the plot.
Oh, yeah.
All right, final thoughts? Any other thoughts? Are we good?
I think so.
All right, with that said, let's close out the story portion of this podcast. We're going to take a quick break, and on the other end, we will get into our numbered reviews, get into what critics thought, do some box office, and then close out with a little franchise talk. So we'll see y'all then. Welcome back. Let's review King Kong 2005. Or Peter Jackson's King Kong. That's kind of what I want to call it.
I like that better.
Yeah. David, you've got our scores in a bowl there. Why don't you pull them at random?
I think I will.
You think you will?
I might. First up, Noah with a 9.5.
Going high.
So, about that, I'm kind of leaning on a 10.
Oh, dang. For 10 for King Kong?
Yeah.
Wow.
I think this movie is just about perfect. The only places that and I wouldn't even call it failing, just the only places that you can find a slight chink in the armor is whenever people don't die from things that they maybe should. Like being swung around. And other than that, if you're okay with sitting down 3 hours, and every bit of those 3 hours is perfect.
It's like your barrier for entry is you got to
Yeah.
sit down for a long time.
Yeah, and like I'm trying to think of something that's an inherent flaw in the vision of this
CG
movie.
is a flaw.
What?
The CG is not perfect.
Okay, but
You
According
asked
to
for
you.
flaws.
lots of no.
It is not
like
perfect,
like
guys.
I said, the vision of this film is executed perfectly. Like you can look at the CG and say, okay, that wasn't perfect. However, the constraints are technology. Like technology and budget.
I was going to say
Yeah.
the technology was, they obviously show it works.
Yeah,
And
we'll
certain-
we'll talk about budget here in a second.
but anything that like the whole set is amazing. The cinematography is amazing. The characters are amazing. You go from one point to the next seamlessly. I don't know. I just think it's as close to perfect as this kind of movie can get. So
All right, are you going with the 10?
yeah,
All right, 10 in the
Nice.
books, guys.
It's bold and I love it.
I don't think it's that bold, but
Next up, somebody who also is bold. AJ with a 10.
yes,
Yeah.
get it.
So it's tough because, I mean, there are flaws, as has been pointed out. And I've approached scoring this movie slightly differently, mainly because, well, first, I guess my criticism would be, yeah, CGI, but I've never really been bothered by CGI as much as a couple other people in this group, which is
could that be?
perfectly valid. I'm not disparaging that. It just personally,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
guess
personal preference.
I need to get my eyes checked, maybe. But also, I mean, the pace that we talked about at the top, it is a factor. And even going into it, you know, I feel like it could be trimmed a little bit, especially the last act. It's a double-edged sword because I know the nature of the style of it is replicating the original, you know, with the black and white and everything. And I just feel like there could be a bit more dialogue that would help me personally be engaged more and kind of get that last or second wind and do the last lap to finally finish it off. I still think you can capture the feel of the original, which is the obvious intent here, but still kind of modernize it a little bit more in the third act. That's my main criticism, honestly. Jack Black, I mean, well, Adrian Brody, I'm a big fan. Kyle Chandler, I'm a big fan. Peter Jackson, obviously a big fan. And Jack Black, I'm not usually a big fan, but I like him in this role a lot. Andy Serkis, of course, amazing in both his roles here. And even the property, King Kong, I'm not especially gravitated towards. I don't dislike it, but I don't really have a particular interest in it. So where I approach this is Peter Jackson's love letter to what brought him into filmmaking, and this is the perfect approach of homage and remaking something to the best of its potential while also modernizing it to a modern audience, laying foundation, paying attention to detail, and realizing things. That's why this is a 10 for me. There are flaws in it from kind of a general flow with the pace, but that's not what the direction of the movie is. And because it's so obvious, at least to me, what the purpose of this movie is, and yet it still also is a great movie. And I think cinematography helps bolster it quite a bit. I mean, there are, especially like a lot of the sunset scenes and the lighting and the scenery. I mean, it's all a beautiful movie. So if you got 3 hours and you got 3 hours to sit there and pay attention, then yeah, this is a 10.
All right. Well, guys, we're at 2 10s right now, guys.
It's crazy,
Guys.
All right. Guys is...
but I love it.
All
I love
right,
it.
Next
by the way.
up, let's see what we got. Irina with a 9.
Oh, wait. Did I not put 9.5?
Oh, you didn't.
Oh, okay. I must have been distracted with the dogs, but I was thinking I was putting in 9.5. So change it to 9.5.
And then bump that up to a 10, baby.
Not quite 10, but like honestly, AJ just said all the reasons my score is so high anyway. So ditto. And then I'm just going to say the only reason it's not a perfect 10 is because of my trouble trying to get around Jack Black not being Jack Black, I guess.
It's the wig.
Yeah, it's the wig. But I still am on the fence about it because I feel like if he wasn't in this, it would significantly change the film still.
Yeah, I feel like it would
Yeah.
suffer.
It's
like
really
seeing-
strange.
Yeah.
It's really strange how that works.
Or if his other body of work supported this role.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of my only factors that I think affects my score is the fact that they try to develop some of the side characters a little more, but then ultimately kind of drop them. There's a point where I'm more interested in King Kong and Anne, which isn't a problem, but every time we go back to the crew, it just feels like, all right, time for them to get picked off again. It's
Bite
just
their
kind
head
of an
off.
excuse for CGI antics. While granted, some of those are really, really good, I don't really get to see any more of the meat of the relationships between the characters. So I think that's the only thing that I would find fault in. Everything else is beautiful, and I would just repeat what AJ said. So.
Yeah.
All right.
And you said something that actually reminded me of what bolsters my score is. I'm a sucker for period pieces, and this does period piece well.
Yes. it
For something
does.
that doesn't
You're right.
necessarily call for it.
It's self-aware about how its period piece-ness too. I feel like it.
Oh, yeah, it's deliberate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I love the way that it's set in the Great Depression, and they don't have anyone outright say, "Well, it's the Great Depression, guys." They
Extra.
exactly. They display it by showing everyone is having trouble with money to some extent.
And they show the divide without spelling it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right.
Next up, Reese with a 9.
Yeah, I did not think I'd be on the lower end of you guys because I feel like
I know, I
9 is a
didn't
very
either.
good score. But I think I'm going to stick with a 9. And it's not... This has nothing to do with length. I'm actually perfectly okay with the 3 hours. My only issues with this movie, and I am very positive on this movie, don't get me wrong. I think people have kind of done this movie dirty recently. Like, especially audiences. Critics liked it more than audiences. Audiences, for some reason, don't like this thing. And it's because of length reasons.
You can't say that until the end.
Well, I'm saying it right now. I think this movie owns its length, and it is proud of it, and it's fine with it. Like, I don't think this is overindulgent in a weird way. I think, like, every scene in this movie I enjoy and I get something out of. My only problems with this movie, and we didn't even talk about it in the plot synopsis, is just some of the ways in which lines are delivered. There's some, and I know this is part of its self-awareness of trying to be a movie of that time, but it's almost like way too on the nose and kind of like cliche. There's just certain dialogues. There's a lot of dialogue that's really natural and great, but there's also dialogue that is just kind of falls flat for me. And I think it's in the first half more than it is the second half. And then obviously you have the clunky line with Jack Black at the very end that just kind of like left me on, like, I get why they had it, but I was also kind of just put off by it. So just some of the line delivery, I think the performances are great. And I love this movie. It is... I can't believe that Peter Jackson directed the Lord of the Rings trilogy and then 2 years later just came out with this thing. Like, how do you even do that? That's like
there was a lot of
superhuman.
groundwork before Lord of the Rings.
There was,
granted.
yes. But they completely restructured this film, too,
Yeah.
from the original groundwork. So it's like, yeah, groundwork was laid, but it was a completely different script. Barely anything was carried over from that previous script. But it's such an impressive effort, and you can tell that it is a labor of love. Peter Jackson's one of those filmmakers that, before The Hobbit, I feel like every scene is intentional.
Yeah.
And it's not... And yes, it's long, but I don't feel like it is at the expense of the story or at the expense of the experience.
It's long, but it's not dragged out.
You can tell Peter Jackson, he was given a check, and he is like, I'm going to put everything I want people to see into this movie. Like, everything that I think is worthy of being seen and experienced, I'm going to put in this movie.
If you don't know the story of King Kong, this is King Kong.
Yeah, it's
Right.
not everything I want to be in the movie. It's everything I think people should see. You know?
Yeah.
I don't think it's a completely selfish, indulgent act. Whereas I think The Hobbit is slightly more indulgent. This one is like, I feel like this is the vision. He's laying like he had one chance to do justice for King Kong, and he's like, I am laying it all out there. I'm putting everything out here. And whether you like it or not, this is the vision. You know? Like, this is, I said it, it's a labor of love, and you get that sense in every scene. And I don't think it's the biggest, best home run ever, but I think it is damn close. So, yeah, 9 out of 10.
All right. I guess it leaves me. Reese, what did you think I was going to give this movie?
I didn't say, but I'm
Yes,
going to
you
guess...
did.
No, I'm not.
No, yesterday you guessed what I was going to give it.
I think you're going to give it the lowest of the bunch. I think you're going to give it an 8.5.
Well, fine. Fine. If you say it, I guess I will. I'm going to give it an 8.5.
It's all Reese's fault.
I blame Reese. Yeah, David with an 8.5. This movie did not hit me the same way it hit you guys, and I think a lot of that is the fact that I didn't grow up with it. I think there is a lot of nostalgia that really does heighten the senses for a lot of this movie.
Are you invalidating our reviews?
No, I think that they're completely valid. I am very big into movies that I'm nostalgic for. I think that it brings a lot to the table, especially for this time period. And this movie is amazing. It really is. It's great. And I think, honestly, there's only a couple things that I dock it points for. And maybe the biggest one is that this world isn't my favorite. It just isn't.
That is
This world isn't my.
I just
favorite.
don't like
it's hard. No, the world it's immersive, but it there are times where it breaks it for me, and I'm just not fully invested.
I get it. Yeah.
It's the
And
brontosaurus.
but it's so good at bringing you back in. The other part that I dislike is honestly Jack Black. I think I love Jack Black. I think all his movies, I love almost every single one of them. Unlike other people, this is one of my least favorites of his. I think that he just breaks it. The immersion, every time I see him on screen, it just doesn't work for me.
You do not like it when Jack Black
'Cause he was
walks
fully
up into the
clothed.
scene.
I honestly think he's just like Irina said, every time I see him, it doesn't feel like he's in the time period. The comedy of him being there just doesn't work for me. I think there are a lot of other actors who would have made this perfect, but he's not one of
I
them.
disagree.
I figured
there's
you
a-
would.
I
That's-
hard
David,
disagree.
I know
no,
you
no,
do.
no. I can see your perspective on not liking him. I disagree that anyone would do it better.
What do you, what, really?
Yes.
Really? There's no other
Yes.
actor on the planet that could do it better than Jack Black.
For this role,
You're
yes.
insane.
I think
That's
he,
actually
one-
untrue.
I think he 100% makes it his own. Nobody
Robin
is,
Williams would do it better.
There's an interview with Jack Black on this movie where it was an interview about his entire filmography and his most significant roles. And when they got to King Kong, it was almost like a different Jack Black came out when he was interviewed about it, where he was just like, oh, like at this point I had just gotten out of School of Rock. I was riding high, and Peter and he was asked by his agent, like, well, who would you like to work for next? And he was like, oh, I just saw Lord of the Rings and I loved it. Aww. And he was like, I would love to, like, Peter Jackson, I'd love to work with him. And he said literally the next couple of days, Peter Jackson reached out to him for the part for King Kong, and he was so starstruck that Peter Jackson would consider him for this role. And he actually, he thought he was going to audition for it, but Peter Jackson just like had him fly in and just showed him like the climactic sequence on the tower. And he was like emotionally moved by it. Aww. And it was like, I would love,
Dude, I love Jack Black.
yeah, I would love
Jack
to
Black.
be a part of it. He's like, of course I'll be in it. And he said it was the longest shoot he's ever done. It was 6 months. And at the end, he said he was crying that it was over. And he wanted to make more and more Kong movies.
I
He
mean,
was like, I don't ever want
it's
it
the
to
most
end.
dramatic, most serious role Jack Black has ever done in his life, so I could totally see that.
He gave him the chance to break out of the typecast.
and
Yeah.
David's least favorite Jack
Sorry,
Black
look,
role.
just because he cares about it doesn't mean it worked.
Because
Just
he's fully
because he
clothed.
cares
I
doesn't
love
mean
Jack
I
Black.
care.
Look, I love that he is so passionate. It moves me that he
Okay.
was moved. It just didn't work.
No, I get it.
All
I
right,
get it.
I'll
I'm gonna
respect
let you
your
finish,
opinion,
but
Scott.
for what it's worth, nostalgia played zero factor in for this movie.
Well,
for
that's
me.
fine. If you did it with zero nostalgia factor, thumbs up.
I'm also in full disagreement. I don't nostalgia taken away. I think Jack Black still works in this role.
That's fine. Look, sorry if I insulted
You know
you guys.
what?
Didn't mean
No,
to.
and David, you're valid, like, because like I think you're again probably right in line with most of the audience here.
We just have fun picking on you sometimes.
Well, it just seems like a lot of you grew up with it, so it seemed like it made sense.
We did.
I didn't
Well-
grow up with it, honestly. I saw it
you
in
see it in
theaters, and I
theaters?
probably haven't seen it. Well, that's not growing up with it. I would say growing up with it
okay.
is seeing it multiple times over
Yeah.
and over.
Yeah.
Like, I saw it in
I-
theaters,
I-
and I kind of forgot about it until I
I see
like,
it once
rewatch
a
it.
year, so it's like
So,
Let's let David finish his
well, I was
Yeah.
just gonna say
No,
on
absolutely
that.
not.
Okay, I was gonna say no, whatever, doesn't matter.
Yeah, like that's one of the things I am, as AJ was saying earlier, there are some of us who weigh CGI heavily. I am one of those people. If
Clearly
it doesn't
didn't for
work,
the Yetis.
yeah, the Yetis didn't do it for me. Hey, look, they got a lot lower than this movie.
not a lot lower, 1.5 points.
That's because Brendan Fraser is better than Jack Black.
Here, everyone else is like, yeah, I want to save this as a picture or a painting, my desktop background, but not you.
Hey, I never said the cinematography was bad. Look, there's a lot of good cinematography and a lot of amazing shots, and
I've never been more tempted to fight you, but I'm gonna let
Okay,
you. I'm gonna let
hold
you go.
on.
I'm
But
gonna
yeah,
let
I
you
think-
go.
when I say CGI problems, you're making it sound like I thought the whole movie was wrong. No, this was amazing. There's a lot of amazing CGI. You can. I'm guessing this is a very
Also,
high
David,
budget.
take yourself back to 2005.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
just
I
saying.
am. I'm going to take myself back, and there are so many scenes, even nowadays, that hold up, so it's like bonkers how good it is. And then there are other scenes that just, they don't follow the same thing. You look at one scene, you're like, how do you take that and then make this scene? And a lot of it, I think, is budget.
Yeah.
And it just pulls me out some of the times. Anything with King Kong is good. Almost all of it, it doesn't... King Kong is like 90% still holding up, but I think there's a lot of the other things they didn't put priority in. And it kind of like the lighting matching, it just, I don't know. There's still blue shades around Naomi Watts' hair in a lot of scenes because they didn't know how to take out the shading.
Oh, boo-hoo.
Yeah, boo-hoo. I'm the guy who weighs it
It's
high.
valid.
Worst movie ever.
No, it's valid.
It's an 8.5. It's a good score. Point is, it's not a movie I'm gonna watch every year like Irina. Like, it's just one that I would, if someone put it on, be like, all right, that'll be fun. I guess I have 3 hours to kill. I love Peter Jackson. I love all the actors and actresses in this movie, but it's just one that didn't strike a chord with me the same way. So 8.5.
You sure you don't want to...
I'm not gonna bump it up. You'd be happy I don't drop it, Reese.
Go ahead and drop it. Let's see.
I'm not gonna do it.
All right. AJ, you want to crunch those numbers for us?
All right, King Kong 2005 has a group average of 9.4, which
That's very good.
ties it with, actually... All right, so we've got Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl, For a Few Dollars More, Die Hard, Tarzan, which we just covered recently, the animated Disney from 99. And then now we have King Kong, all at 9.4.
Another 9.4.
I love all those
Nice.
9.4s. Those are some of the best.
All right, so bookending that, we have at 9.5 Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World, and Blade Runner. And then below it, we have War for the Planet of the Apes, which I know is going to upset some people here. That had a 9.2.
Hey, that's still a good score. I'm happy with it. No, I'm happy with this. Like, King Kong holds a special place in my heart. I wouldn't personally rate it that high, but I'm digging the love for it, and I can't complain. So that's my personal thought. All right. With that said, let's move on to critics. On Rotten Tomatoes, this movie has an 84% with an audience score of 50%.
What?
Yeah. As I said, this is one of those...
That movie's too long. I don't want to sit.
Dude,
I will
I
say-
thought I was harsher than
feature
8.5.
like that.
I don't
Holy
want
crap.
my money's worth out of this.
This isn't
No,
Mighty
that-
Joe Young.
Wow.
This is primarily
Primately.
length driven from what I've read on reviews.
Yeah.
It's like people just don't like how long it is.
Oh my god.
And
They obviously
My
didn't go
time.
to see Return of the King.
look, I
Yeah.
don't want to invalidate people's reviews.
I
just-
will
I do.
invalidate all of them.
I'm switching teams. I'm on y'all's side now.
I will invalidate all of them. You don't
Sorry.
have 3 hours of your time for that, but you can scroll through your Twitter, like,
or your TikTok for
or whatever.
5 hours. Yeah.
You, like, get out of
They
here.
didn't have
Yeah.
TikTok at
It's
that
too
time.
long for me to sit and spend
Anyway.
$10 for.
yeah.
Like, come on.
Hey, YouTube came out this year.
Yeah, that's basically like if Jaws were to come out today, it would get like a 50% from audiences because it takes like an hour and a half to see the shark or something.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a similar case
Yeah.
almost. I'm sure there's people that didn't like it for different reasons as well, but from what I was scrolling through, it's mostly because it's freaking long. So yeah, sorry. Yeah, on Metacritic, it has an 81, which is actually very good on Metacritic from critics. That
Basically a 10.
no, that denotes universal acclaim, even though 81 doesn't sound like universal acclaim. That's what they say it is. From audiences, they're more generous on Metacritic. It's 7.4 out of 10.
Good for them.
And on IMDb, it has a 7.2 out of 10.
IMDb doesn't know how to go above and below 6 and 7.
I know. It's so weird that Rotten Tomatoes is the sole one where audiences are like, nope, not for me.
I think it's a lot of people retroactively writing it in because Rotten Tomatoes came out like a bit after 2005.
Yeah.
Like quite a bit.
But the overall consensus is critics liked it. They liked it to loved it. and audiences were mixed to positive, I'll say. That's fair, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Box office. This movie released on December 16th in 2005. This was a year for me, I feel like, where a lot of movies that I was really feeling a lot of the movies that came out at this time. Also playing in theaters at this time were The Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe,
Wow.
The Family Stone,
You were in high school.
yep, and Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire,
Whoa.
and Syriana.
Wait, what was the exact day it came out?
December 16th.
Oh, December 16th. Okay.
Yep, this is a Christmas time movie. With that said, the movie was budgeted at $207 million.
Yep, there it is.
Yep, a record at the time. This was the biggest budget movie of all time. Of course, it's been eclipsed by a number of movies since then. But yeah, it was the biggest budget movie of 2005 and every year before it.
Yep, that does not surprise me. You can look at this movie and go, "Yep, they
It
spent
cost
their
a lot.
money."
Yeah. With that said, what do y'all think this movie did worldwide? I'm going to start with you, AJ.
All right, so following Return of the King, Peter Jackson's got the clout, and King Kong, also big name. Let's say 500.
500. David.
I'm doing the math, man. I'm doing the math. They didn't get a sequel, so I mean, did I get 3 times and maybe the scores didn't? I don't. I'm just gonna go high because it feels like it should get higher. I'm gonna go with 600.
All right. Noah.
You said what was the budget total?
207 million.
207. Gosh, I feel like AJ's 500 is right on.
I'll box them in.
I love this movie, but I don't think it went high like that. I'm gonna go for 80.
All right. Irina.
Just because of length.
550.
550.
Boxed in, AJ. I'm sorry.
Irina, you are the closest.
No.
And I promise you I'm correct this time. I know I've
I
said
must have
that
been
and then I'm
close,
wrong.
I feel like my win is like a less of a win because everyone kind of did the groundwork for me. But
That's why I
I'll
ask in
take it.
different orders every time. So
I'll
it's fine.
take it.
562
Oh my
million.
gosh.
Dang, that's pretty
I
close.
would have won.
You
I
could
know.
have been a contender.
Could have been
I know.
a contender.
Yeah, the movie, it didn't open as high as they wanted it to, but it actually kind of legged it out and ended up being quite a success despite
Really?
the massive budget.
I figured it would be the opposite.
Yeah, I know, right? You'd think people would be super excited to see it, and that's what I think Universal was anticipating. They thought this would be a massive opener. But yeah, it just kind of built legs, which is so antithetical to like audiences, because you look at the reviews from audiences, they're more kind of lukewarm, but they kept showing up. Like, they kept returning, like there was decent word of mouth for it. That also could be the fact that it is a December, like, winter release, and those movies, like, they have massive legs, because kids are out of school for 2-3 weeks, and they're just all going to see the movies. So yeah, it was a decent success. One would say enough for a sequel, but I don't see no King Kong 2. Do y'all?
Where'd it go?
Where'd it
He
go?
did.
Well, he may or may not have fallen.
That's true.
He can't
He
get
is
up.
kind of dead. But that is not. I mean, that characters dying have never completely killed a franchise. They always find ways to bring things back or do other stuff.
Prequels.
Queen Kong.
Yeah. So
Queen Kong. No.
Queen Kong. Oh my god. Or Son of Kong. That's your.
No.
No, that's actually.
It was a real
That's actually
sequel.
a thing. Yeah.
Oh gosh, that's
His
a bad
daddy's
idea.
gone and he's mad.
Or King
Yep.
Kong Skull Island.
So this is from Wikipedia, the most reputable source of all online sources. But in March 2021, Adam Wingard said in an interview that back in 2013, Peter Jackson had been interested in producing a sequel to the film, titled Skull Island, with Wingard as director and Simon Barrett writing. Jackson had been impressed with Wingard's work in You're Next and investigated a potential sequel. However, the King Kong rights had already been transferred to Warner Brothers by 2013, which complicated a sequel to a Universal-produced movie. Wingard says that Jackson was thinking of setting the proposed movie during World War I, which would make it a prequel, but that the studio was uninterested in a World War I era film. Wingard pivoted to offering a modern-day sequel, but ultimately nothing came of the proposal. The film was the only live-action film in the franchise to be distributed by Universal Pictures. And no, that's actually irrelevant. But yeah, there was ideas for a sequel to this film, Skull Island. We did actually get Kong Skull Island, and Adam Wingard would eventually go on to direct Godzilla vs. Kong, so he was very interested in the whole monster verse. But yeah, no sequel ever came of this original King Kong. But, Peter Jackson did have interest in it, and thus that's why we're talking about it. It does qualify itself. It's so weird to think that there could have been a sequel to this film.
I know.
Would y'all even want one? Because this feels like such a self-contained story.
I don't want it.
You don't want it?
I don't.
Yeah, I'm
Naomi
actually
Watts
kind of...
gives birth to a hybrid man.
No.
Oh my gosh. That would be something.
Baby Kong.
Yeah, this is... I'm kind of glad this movie just was a one and done. Like, I think it's a perfectly self-contained story. That said, if Peter Jackson were involved with some sort of sequel, I'd watch it. Like, I wouldn't refuse it. I'd be like, if that's what you want to do.
If there's a movie that comes out, you're going to see it.
Exactly. But especially if Peter Jackson's involved. Wouldn't you, David? Come on.
Would. No, if Peter Jackson's involved, of course I would.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I do think it would end up being a Son of Kong type of thing. Like, it would be some sort of... Like, they wouldn't try to bring King Kong back. It'd be more like, oh, King Kong knew a Kong lady on the island, and now he's got a son or something. I don't know. Everyone leave him there. They're just okay.
I'm fine with just the one.
Yeah, me too. No, I'm totally fine with just the one.
Yeah, instead of New York, it's in Dubai.
Gosh.
Well, it's New World's tallest tower, so.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. Burj Khalifa.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
That thing's insane.
I think they're building another skyscraper that's supposed to be even taller than that one. I don't know where it is, but they're doing that thing. People are having their, tower wars.
Just build a space elevator already.
Yeah, go to space. All right. No King Kong 2. That means we are at the end of this episode. We're done. Yeah. Next week, we are starting a new miniseries. This is the end of the Monkey Business miniseries, our longest miniseries yet. I've been super selfish and overindulgent and kept us on this.
Cut this. You don't need to say this.
I'm going to say it. We've talked about so many Monkey/Ape movies. I'm going crazy.
Going bananas.
Yep. But
You
the next...
stole that.
David, you've got our next miniseries. We are doing Robin Williams films.
Yes.
And we are starting with Mrs. Doubtfire.
Hello!
Which is a movie I've not seen since I was like 8 years old. So I don't even know my feelings on this. I don't even know how I'm going to approach this movie, but I'm excited.
What a weird 180, right?
I know, it's totally
Some
different.
of these are going to be hard to rate.
I know. I'm going to save it, as I usually do. I can't wait to talk about Robin Williams movies. This is going to be so much fun. Great great mini-series choice. A bit unconventional for us. We usually go by like kind of subgenre, but now we're actually basing it around a specific actor. But I think that's cool.
We're trying to branch out a little bit.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk about these films. It's going to be a slightly shorter miniseries than the last one, but we're still going to bring our all to each of these episodes.
And we may or may not have a special Halloween series for you guys.
Yes. All right. With that said, that is the end of this episode. Unless you're a Patreon subscriber, and we've got our Monkey Business Awards after this. I can't wait. All right. Goodbye, guys.
Bye.
Later.
I'm real good at crapping the crappers.